I've been collecting data for all the vPubs that we've covered in the past, where we looked at where trying to discover where the good value remained in single malt. We've been doing this since 2020. Went up some spreadsheets and crunching some numbers to cover it again in 2025. What I realized would be really quite good fun is to take the original numbers from 2020 and take the numbers from where we are today in 2025 for the same expression whiskey, where the identical expressions are still available, of course, and compare to see have there been price increases and how much have those increases been. It's all very well, excuse me, I hit my screen there. Sorry, my keyboard. It must be a shortcut key or something. Sorry, it's all very well for us to complain about the fact that prices have gone up, but without actually crunching the numbers, it's largely anecdotal, isn't it? Anyway, that's what we're going to cover tonight. I've got some interesting things to share with you, a few surprises, and a few probably expectations will be met too. But I'm looking forward to it as always. I'll see you in a second. Hello, Whisky folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday night. Welcome to what might be a bit of a surprise appearance on a Thursday night for some of you, because I did suggest at the end of last week's vPub that we might be skipping this session this week. The reason is it's half term in the UK for my kids, and we were going to book a trip away for this weekend. In the end, we didn't because of studying and other commitments and other things going on. There are no trips away. So while I'm here, there's no way I'm going to just sit on a Thursday night and not open the doors of the vPub, right? So we go ahead. We continue. We have a vPub where perhaps you weren't expecting it. I hope that's okay for most of you. And if you've been caught out by this and you're picking it up on the replay and you didn't realise I was here tonight, I apologise. I'm not very good at sharing on social media these days. I'm finding lots of things a wee bit tough to keep up with. Social media is absolutely one of those things. It's designed in a way for use today that I think has drifted quite a long way away from where it was originally. Social media used to just be great for communication and keeping up to date with people, but now all the social media feeds are really filled with things to keep your attention. Really, you just end up losing a lot of time in them and things, and realizing that there's a lot of brain rot there, a lot of horrible information, horrible attitudes and things. So I've been staying away, but that means that I've lost a way to communicate with you a wee bit. It's easy to communicate with patrons. It's easy to communicate with barflies and keep up with barflies as well through the Facebook group. But other avenues you might have noticed I'm a bit delinquent on recently. Listen, regardless, it doesn't matter whether you're here live, I'd appreciate it, or whether you're picking it up on the replay. It's perhaps a nice wee surprise for me to be able to hang out with you. And I can have my break in Easter, right? We'll work on through till springtime. Anyway, I hope you're all doing very well. I wonder what you've got in the glass. I wonder what you've paid for what you've got in the glass. And I wonder if you've paid more for it than the last time you purchased it, maybe. I think a lot of us feel like that, right? We feel like especially if we've been into whiskey for a little while, we remember fondly when we could pick up whiskey cheaper than it is today. And we often have examples in our mind, and those examples, we have them in our mind because they are obvious examples to us of where we have felt a difference, a change. Because of what's happened over the last few years, global inflation, pandemic, everything, we sense immediately that we're feeling a little bit stretched when it comes to buying whiskey. Everything I'm going to share with you tonight is not definitive, it's not authoritative, it's just me and my personal data that I collect for me in order to guide my content and guide my messaging. The fact I'm choosing to share a vPub with you tonight in order to share all that data with you and to share what I extrapolate, what I take out of that data, is just fun. It's just to help guide us a little bit. Like I say, it's not definitive, and it does not count for all markets everywhere. I know this to be the case. However, what we have discovered over the years, if you see the dynamics starting to shift and change here closer to the source, you tend to find that it ripples out into the further markets. So after I've welcomed all the lounge in tonight, what I'll do is I'll take you through how we're going to cut this thing up tonight, how we're going to chop it up and share it. Don't worry, we won't be doing deep dives into spreadsheets. I've done all that already, but I have kind of summarized them a wee bit for you. So before we make any kind of summaries or we make any kind of calls on what we've discovered, I'll take you through brands, individual products, and producers, and let you know exactly in the UK, based on our prices here, who have been saints and who have been sinners. That's how we're going to cut it up tonight. Anyway, we'll get to all that in a wee second. Now that you're all pouring in now that you've maybe just had your notification pop up that I'm live, I hope that you do have that. There's a wee bell icon underneath on the YouTube desktop here. If you click that, when I go live, hopefully you get a notification when I drop a new announcement for a vPub or any other video. You get a wee notification to know that it's happening. Anyway, how you all doing? Let's jump into the lounge and do what we always do. Welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Justin Wan is in. Good to see you, buddy. Happy midterm to everyone. If you have school tomorrow, go to bed. No school tomorrow for me, buddy. And I know it's not half term, it's not midterm for everyone. But it just is for us here this particular week. Good to have you in. It's talking about going to bed. Is it not middle of the night or very early in the morning for you, buddy? Donald Stewart is here. Good evening all. Hello, Aquaviti. Donald, I think that might be the first time I've welcomed you. Welcome to the vPub. Nice to have you here, Donald. Danny Hebbington is saying a nice wee surprise for tonight. Aquaviti can never have enough vPub in your life. Thank you, buddy, and it's nice to have you hanging out with us here. What's in the glass, Danny? Julian Rickman is saying, evening, Roy. Aquaviti barflies think we may wish we had put a few more bottles away in the stash, especially those older age statements. I know we can have a wee bit of that going on, Julian, but what I would also say to you is that even if we did back then, it would have perhaps prevented us picking up interesting things that's come along in the meantime. I know that nostalgia and I know that regret and things, but I'm going to talk a wee bit about that, about just the cost of whiskey in general and how we've never got, hindsight is 20/20 vision and nobody's got a crystal ball for the future, right? So it can be tough, and I'm trying not to beat myself up too much about that. I remember when I could buy X for X amount and these kind of things. But I know what you're talking about, Julian. Good to have you. Jimmy Legg is here saying good evening, everyone. Hi, Roy Aquaviti. Good to have you in, Jimmy Legg. How you keeping? How's you and Angie? Nice to have you in here, as always, big guy. Whiskey Weekend Drum, Harrow is saying good evening, Roy. I'm just picking up the orange like I always do. So if you're trying to get my attention, just type Aquaviti and it'll highlight orange for me. It's much easier for me to keep up with a busy chat. Doodle the Drammarnie saying good evening, Aquaviti and dear barflies. Wonderful to have a vPub tonight. After all, I'm letting some air into a signatory Chininic 17-year-old PX from one of the stupid big Vaz bottles for £78. How? So the stupid big Vaz bottles, that'll be the decanters, right? Which is the cast strength series. £78 for a 17-year-old PX Chininic. That seems fantastic value. There's also a 17-year-old Chininic available from the Bonaccord right now. It's called the Punter's Dram, £62.50, which even trumps even your bargain, Arnie. There are bargains to be had out there. Perhaps not for everyone, depending on where you are. Of course, we always have to caveat it, but there are still some, let's say, relatively affordable things. Clicks saying to celebrate tonight's topic, I'll pour myself a Glen Scotia 10-year-old peated, still in my local shop's shelf at its 2020 price of €37 and beautiful stuff at that. There's somebody else sipping a Glen Scotia tonight, and I've got a bottle here that I'm going to uncork. So we'll be drinking the same stuff, Klitzt and Mike Molasses. Fantastic. I hope it's going down well. Bargain, €37, right? Jane Kimo is saying, evening, Roy. Sipping a nice Scapa 15 bought directly from the distillery. Good for you. I wonder if that's the wee 50cl bottles. Good to have you in, Gino. How are you keeping? Peter Hunt is saying it's been a while. Hope everyone is keeping well. Peter, it's always brilliant to welcome you. Your bar stool has not been taken by anyone else in the meantime. It's here waiting for you, buddy, whenever it suits you to hop on top of it. Drew from Arizona is saying, sorry, your trip plans didn't work out, but anytime you provide a vPub, it's relished aquavitae. You can't forget how great these and the lock-ins got so many of us through the past few years, my friend. Drew, it's fantastic to have you in, buddy. There's no way I was going to not have a vPub tonight. What else would I be doing sitting on the sofa? I would have probably been doing something whiskey related and been a wee bit frustrated that I wasn't hanging out with all of you. It's brilliant to have you, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. Stevie O is saying, evening, Roy. Great to be here and have a fragrant drops. 15-year-old North British in the old Glen Cairn Slantia. That went out on Dramface on Monday. We reviewed that. Doogie Crystal did a review, I think, for that very one, that very bottling. I hope you're enjoying it, buddy. It sounds like you are. Jason Whiskey Wise, my pal Jason is here. Good evening, Roy Aquavitae. I hope you're keeping well, and good evening. Just recovering from a very strong flu. It's a shame you're not keeping so well, buddy. Please make sure that you do recover from it. Take your time, get back to full strength first. You can only invite it back again, right? Hellswood is saying 13-year-old Timorous Beastie for starters. £38, bargain, flavoursome, blended malt. She's saying Slantia. Helen, good to have you, and I'm glad you're enjoying a wee Dougie Lang Timorous Beastie. Falsgraf Klaus in Germany saying, since I'm just coming back from the flu and calibrating my palate, I am with the cheap stuff. A simple Glenmorangie 10-year-old will do tonight. Kind of quintessential whiskey for me. It's almost like, I often say this, that you guys read my mind. You might see, Klaus, a wee Glenmorangie appearing tonight, just for kicks, just for fun. Henrik Schmidt, the same aquavitae that just jumped right to the bottom there, so I guarantee you've missed a lot of stuff, maybe not. Henrik Schmidt is saying, Speyburn 15-year-old, 50 GBP on sale in Denmark. That's a bargain. And it's a gorgeous whiskey, in my personal opinion, Henrik. I hope you're enjoying it too. For 50 quid, it's an absolute no-brainer. Talking of Speyburn, you remember that maybe I should have had the link for it, but you remember the Dramface petition for Inverhouse owners of Speyburn, asking them to not dilute, not chill filter their new rebranding for those products that we love. So Speyburn 15, Speyburn 18 has been relaunched again, we believe, at 43% ABV. No official announcements yet, but there's enough chatter out there for us to believe that it's absolutely real. Hopefully it's early enough that there's an ability for somebody to at least have a discussion, or to have some products available still for enthusiasts. I'll tell you what I'm going to do just now. I'm going to head over to Dramface and see if I can get that link. Because it was cruising up towards 800 signatures. And I think once it gets to a certain size, I think the team at Dramface would be interested in maybe sharing that with the folks at Inverhouse. Not just the fact that it's got X amount of signatures, but also because of all the feedback and comments. The comments under the article on Dramface, it was the Speyburn 10-year-old, and that was the review, the article on Dramface, where they compared the 10-year-old unchill filtered versus the 10-year-old chill filtered. But the comment section underneath there, and the comment section over at the petition itself, I'm just trying to find it. Here's the link here, good. So hopefully I'm able to share this. It's asking me to sign it. So if I just copy that link and drop it in here, because I can tell you that today we're now 830 signatures. It's still motoring along. It's still going really, really well. So I'm going to just drop that in, and I'm going to pin that to the top in the hope that we can share it. No, I'm sure you've signed it already, and if you have, thank you so much. If you haven't signed it, please sign it and leave a wee comment in the petition as well, so that we can share all the comments and feedback with everyone at Inverhouse, and let them know that it's important to us. We love their whiskey the way it is. We love authentic whiskey, and if we can get that up to 1,000, I think that's quite a meaningful number. It's not just me banging my gums. It's not just the team at Dramface shouting about it. It's people that actually care about good quality single malt whiskies with nothing taken away and nothing added. For your consideration, please, I've put that link up there and I'll leave it in the hope that you can share it wherever you're sharing whiskey, whatever groups, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, whatever it is that you're participating in. You can change it there and encourage people to have a wee read at it and maybe apply their signature if it's something that they can get behind too. Aye. So I'm glad you're enjoying that. I think that's a fantastic price for that Speyburn 15. Sid Martin is saying, I was number 800. So there you go, Sid. Why did it take you so long to sign it? Thank you, buddy. Thank you for your support. And it was really nice to hang out with you earlier this week. It was nice to welcome you back in Scotland, buddy. David Larenko saying, I'm here having Lafroig quarter cask, €55 versus Lafroig 10, 43%. That's the export strength. We have 40%, even worse, circa $60 from the US. Both purchased more than 3 years ago, and a time of inflation investing in stocks is a good deal. Clever man, David. I wish we had the foresight, but more than anything, I wish we had the budget to be able to do it. Peterhead is saying, newborn as in congratulations period, hip hip hooray, Aquaviti shout out required. So Frank Rochford, our pal Frank, I think Frank is actually originally from the Wee Toon. I think he's from down Campbelltown way. I think that's the right Frank. It looks like there's a newborn arrived. Frank, I'm looking for your name to see if that's correct. Regardless, I hope it is the case, and we'll raise a wee glass to say welcome to the new member of the family. Nice to have you in, Frank. How are you keeping? Cheers. Oh my goodness. It's a very, very, very generous dram. Just dropped in from This Is Alan. He's saying greetings from a train gliding along the California coast. Amtrak isn't known for their whiskey selection, so I brought a third full bottle of Wireworks with us. This is Alan. Feeling bad now. Which Alan is that? Alan Smith? Alan Wilson? Alan, which Alan are you? It's amazing. Anyway, you're a barfly, and that's a very, very generous dram, Alan. Thank you for spreading some of the holiday joy. It's wonderful. I hope you enjoy your Wireworks. I hope you're in good company, and I hope you're enjoying the west coast of the US. Thank you, Alan. Cheers. Gary Field has just signed up and joined the Aquavita Barflies. And along with This Is Alan, who's celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 8 months, have the day off today. Excited to tune in live. Fantastic. Those guys are supporting. They've clicked the YouTube membership button, and they're keeping the vPub, the vPub on YouTube completely ad-free. Nobody needs to sit through ads while they're watching the vPub. Thanks very much to the Barflies for their support. It's terrific to have it. My regular support is from Patreon. Thank you very much for the people that have stepped up. It seems to be when I talk about Patreon, where I mention it, I always feel really bad about it. You know, you don't like to be going about panhandling or have a cap in hand or whatever. But amazing, over the years, it's built up to such an extent that I can finance all of this going forward, and the reason that the vPub will endure going forward, and this channel, and it's been able to finance a lot of other projects as well, believe me, is because of the Patreon support I have. It's fantastic and heartwarming to have you supporting me very recently, but so many of you have been there for a long, long time now. It's wonderful for it. I just always need to remember to thank patrons. Danny Ebbington is also celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 37 months, saying, come join us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Danny. Lassie is in, and he has recently become a patron as well. Lassie, I hope you don't mind me saying thank you very much for your recent support. Lassie, I was just about to read out your comment there, and it dropped down. There it is, having a Balblair 12, £33 in the Border Shop at Puttgarden, he's saying. They also had a Bruichladdich 18 for 120, so I grabbed that too. It's a gorgeous whiskey. I wonder if the more recent batches are still as good as that original batch. I hope so. It's fantastic. Haven't tried it yet, but considering to open it tonight. Lassie, it's up to you. Don't want to bully anybody into opening their bottles, but that's a good one. Ginger Genius Sean is saying, good evening, Roy, and everyone. And Jimmy Legg is thanking Alan as well. That money's going to a quality person. That's very nice of you, Jimmy, especially considering that you've spent time in my company as well. Remco de Vries is saying, a very timely topic, blown my whiskey budget for the first 2 months on replacing my Apple desktop setup and car repairs. Pillaging my collection at the moment. Remco, at least you've got some whiskey already stashed there to get you through a period where you don't need to buy anything. You've had other things take over your budget. It's right on point is how I want to start things tonight, Remco. But I think that's the first time I might have welcomed you in. Nice to have you here, and it's nice to have you as a barfly. Tom Freeney, good to see you, Tom. At 40%, I suspect Speyburn will just lose the enthusiast market, and it'll be squeezed out by the bigger bottlers at the same time. It looks like a lose-lose to me. I have to say we're all feeling it. We don't really know the decision and the sensibilities behind it, but it feels instinctively wrong for us. I feel like Speyburn was just starting to really build a real respect for that 15 and 18-year-old in their core range. We agree, Tom. Sure, Kitty saying, I believe it's Alan Joyce. Alan Joyce, thank you very, very much for your generous dram. And Sugar Kitty, Jeff, thank you for shouting them out. Okay, A. Martins is saying, evening, Roy, having the Altmore red wine cask from Thompson Brothers. Looking forward to the evening. Cheers. A. Martins, I wonder what the A stands for, but it's good to have you here, buddy. Okay, I've got some Benriach in the glass tonight, something from Brown Foreman. This has been on the vPub before, a couple of times potentially, but this is their 16-year-old I'm sipping tonight. I think this is okay. I think it's just a wee bit predictable, a wee bit pedestrian. Unfortunately, despite it being a 16-year-old malt whiskey, it is bottled at 43%. We know it's going to be chill filtered. I feel like this is a good whiskey, and it's a very, very good value price point for a 16-year-old malt. Is well priced in the UK at least. It's difficult for me to recommend though, because there's nothing particularly characterful about it. It's just good 16-year-old whiskey. I'd say it was maybe even a wee bit forgettable. It feels very well put together. It feels very balanced. It's got nice spice to it. I noticed that tonight, despite the 43% ABV, you are picking up some spice. And I don't mean because of alcohol burn. I mean, it's generally quite a nice wee spiced malt, bit of wood spice in there, and lots of fruit. Clearly one of these kind of vattings. In fact, it tells us what kind of casks we've got on here. Bourbon barrel, sherry cask, and virgin oak. So the virgin oak might be the thing that's bringing the spice here. The tasting notes here says stone fruit, honey, creamy hazelnut. Smoke level trace. Spiced apple. Yeah, I'll give it that. Apricot, malt sweetness, nutty oak, and candied peel. Yeah, fairly generic tasting notes, and I would say that they're fairly on point. I don't know if I'm getting much nuttiness. Maybe by the power of suggestion. But it's been a good wee bottle to have here. You can say I'm getting through it. I don't know when I bought this. It was sometime in the middle of last year. But we're hardly tearing through it. It's not something that we're in a rush to go and replace. But the reason I'm sipping with you tonight is that it's one of the bottles that has actually bucked the trend when it comes to increasing prices. Let me speak a wee bit about what we've been talking about in the chat, just to open things up. When we talk about having 2020 vision, or hindsight having 2020 vision and no crystal ball for the future, you know, the folk with some money might choose to buy extra bottles of the things that they're loving and stock up while the prices feel like they might increase. But for me, even from day one, when I first started picking up bottles of whiskey to sip and collect, and I don't mean collect it to keep as something to cherish, I mean something to have as part of a selection. I was opening these bottles that were always going to get consumed. But even from day one, and that's the cheapest that whiskey has ever been back in 2005 when I started buying whiskey, I felt that whiskey was expensive. I'd never spent that amount of money on booze before, and it always felt like a big treat, and it was always felt like a big outlay to me. Now, it may be that I've been tenderized. I've tenderized myself over the years. I've become much more laid back about choosing not to spend money on, I don't know, clothes or going out or doing lots of other things. I've been keeping that money, and I've put it towards whiskey because it's nice to have that thing at home. And over the years, I've been spending more and more and more. Of course I have. I'll refer you to last week's vPub. However, we can never forget that whether whiskey is expensive or increasing in price, or whether it's expensive and reducing in price, or wherever it is, it's an expensive outlay. It's a luxury, and it's a luxury hobby as well. So even when you're thinking that prices might go up, or even when you think you've found something that you really love, it's not an easy decision to go out and buy one or two backups versus buying the next bottle that you might love just as much. So I've given myself a bit of a hard time over the years for not buying things that I love and having backup bottles of it. But I'm kind of relaxed about that now because there's just so many other things to get to grips with. But only if the prices are right for the value. So it might seem as if all of the data and everything I'm going to share with you tonight is just going to focus on raw cost. When we finish the topic tonight, what we actually want to talk about is cost, quality, and value. I think that they are inextricably linked, and I think it's more acute right now than it's been for a long, long time. Hopefully, we'll get to that at the end. Danny Hebington is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 37 months. Seems to come join us. Sorry, Danny, I picked that one up, but there's another wee dram came in. Yes, it is. It's from my pal David Hong, who's commenting tonight for a wee change. Just want to say hello, Roy. Hope all is well. It very much is, David. Good to hear from you. And as always, nice to have a wee welcome dram from you, David, as well. Thank you very much. Cheers to you. And Danny, thanks for your support, buddy. Cheers. Okay, so I mentioned to you how back in 2020 was the first time we started to do this topic. The dram coming in from my pal Rick Johnson saying, when faced with a choice between keeping money in savings or returning to Scotland, we had no choice. Counting down 1 month until we're at the Independent Spirits Festival and Film in Leith. Fantastic, Rick. I believe you're a patron of mine as well. We're squirreling away. Just today, I've been having a conversation backwards and forward with my pal and patron Robert, who's over on the East Coast in Edinburgh. We're putting together a wee event on the Sunday for Barflies only. Or let's say that's not true. It's not for Barflies only, but obviously Barflies and Aquaviti patrons will be prioritised as always. I give my patrons very, very little in return. So in prioritising them in special events and special releases and things is the least I can do. So Rick, keep your eyes on that. And depending on what you're doing on the Sunday, there'll be a wee activity. There'll be some good drams and shelter and warmth and good company for everyone on this Sunday. Countdown 1 month until he's gone to the festival and the film as well. The trailers for that film are out on the Water of Life YouTube channel if you want to go and have a look at the trailers there. They've released 2 trailers from it at least, I think, so interesting for you to see what's coming up. I think Thompson Brothers and Signatory Vintage are smashing the value for money thing at the moment, says Hell's Wood. And Tom Elmer, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think that Thompson Brothers have worked out a different way to do things, but they've always been fairly well priced for a lot of their releases, hence the sheer demand for them. And Signatory are continuing to support their 100 proof series, their exceptional cask 100 proof series as well. And as we've mentioned tonight, there's a 17-year-old Chirinic out there for 78 quid. Tommy Elmer, my pal Tom, good to see you, big guy. Saying interesting that you say occasionally regret not buying a backup bottle, but would you ever regret giving a bottle away to a friend? Of course not. No, that's absolutely true. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm not trying to kind of blow smoke up my own skirt here. A lot of the backup bottles that I do buy of things that I love, I'll meet someone who loves it too and misses it, and there'll be an excuse or a reason at some point in the future for me to be able to gift it to them. So it can be both, right? It can absolutely be both. Fantastic. Billy Abbott is saying, come and say hello if you're at the Indie Fest. I'll be pouring some tasty drams. Can't wait to see you there, Billy. It'd be fantastic to catch up with you. It's been a wee while. In fact, despite us passing each other, either on the way down to Campbelltown in the car, right, or coming in and out of Deanston, for example, I've never actually stopped to shake hands. I think that's right. I don't think we've actually met in life, so that's another good. That's another reason to look forward to the festival. And Harrow is saying, got my whiskey base on Kilkerran prices jumps. Kilkerran 12, 50 to 60 euro. Kilkerran 8, 47 to 65 euros, Kilkerran 16, 74 to 90, fair around 10 to 15 euro price hike in 5 years. Well, I don't think you'll be surprised, Harrow, that that was one of the products that I've been measuring since 2020. Let's get on with it. Sorry if I'm missing some comments and things. I'll try and keep up with you all as much as I can throughout the evening. It's nice to see you all. I see Peter Lee's just dropped in. Good evening, all of us still at work at Kwang Tung. Doodle the Dram and Sid popped in tonight for some food. Aquavita, it was good to see you in the Bon on Tuesday. It was good to see you too, buddy. I'm jealous of those guys getting to eat some decent food prepared by the Lees. Ian Bruce is saying good evening, all. I hope everyone is happy and healthy. Okay, I've been going on now for half an hour. Let's get it started now that you're all comfy and in. Here's how we went about this, and I think we'll do it over here on this screen. Because of the value for money vPubs that we started way back in 2020, it meant that I was cataloguing the available retail prices back then. Like I say, these are not authoritative, it's not definitive, these are just my personal collection of information for my own ends, in order for me to formulate how I speak to you in the vPub, in order for me to have a handle on what's the trends and what's going up and what's going down and what's staying the same and everything in between. So it just so happened that as I was looking to do another Where's the Value session for 2025, I thought, well, let's do a direct comparison because we're 5 years in now. The real inflation we feel started 2019, 2020, it started, but during the pandemic, we saw some really, really difficult times. And the prices of not just whiskey, but prices of many other things went crazy too. So it's easy to write off a jump in price and put it down to rising energy costs, rising interest rates, rising raw material costs, whatever it may be. It's easy just to accept that the prices are more expensive. But we can actually measure what inflation has been and what we would expect. And we can also think about some other things that might have affected the Scotch industry or the whiskey industry, let's say, in a very general sense. And then we start to look at things with a wee bit more information. It's not just anecdotal, it's not just our feeling, it's not just based on our own personal exchanges and memories, but it's actually because we've taken some time to look into it. But that's all it can ever be. Everything I'm sharing with you tonight is just shining a wee bit more light on things. It is just my own personal takes. And the way I've done things, pretty broad brush, a wee bit clumsy at times, but I think it'll back up some feelings, some instincts that you already have. But I also think it might throw up some surprises for us too. Let's do a wee screen share here. Let's see, does that come in? Good, let's clean up the background here. So these prices were originally taken from a data set that I shared with you back in the Where's the Value vPub way back in 2020. October 2020 specifically. So we're about 4.5 years in. So if we measure over the last 5 years, we're almost at 5 years. It should be able to take into account all those really, really tricky years that we've seen. So what I'm going to do with you tonight is I'm going to take you through brands, the individual brands. So when I talk about a brand, I've got Benriach here as a brand, but of course it's owned by the producer, Brown-Forman. So I'll take you through brands, the percentage increases of brands, the percentage increases on producers, but also percentage increases on individual expressions too. And I think that over the three, we'll be able to see, or I was able to consider that there was a pattern, an obvious pattern there. I'll share with you how I'm putting this thing together. So these are, if we talk about brands, these are all the brands that's involved. If I take you through, I'm just listing them here. I'll pause for a second so you can take it in. You can pause the YouTube video if you're picking it up on replay, for example. So I went through all the available core ranges that were widespread and recognizable out in the market. So we're looking at 30 producers, so the owners of all of those brands I've just listed, covering 76 brands, So the brand might be, for example, we've got there Tobermory as a brand, but also Legic from Tobermory is also another brand, and covering 157 individual core range products. It was not exhaustive, but it picked up most of the recognizable common ones, certainly the ones that shipped internationally as well. And that's what we're focusing on tonight, picking up those and measuring them against 2020. And of course, what we're going to do is we're going to consider what's happened to prices in that time and in between times. So this is the Bank of England's online inflation calculator. You can go on there and put in any time you want back to, they brag about going back to 1209. Not many of us were hanging around in 1209. We certainly weren't buying whiskey. But I went back to 2020. If you £100 in 2020, today would cost you £125. Okay. So that's the inflation that we've seen in 5 years. Pretty significant hike, right? So that's our benchmark, that 25% increase in the last 5 years since 2020 are what we're going to be focusing on. And what we're going to do is we're going to look to define what a saint and a sinner is. Anybody that's way above 25% is obviously we would throw into the category of being a sinner. That's whether it's a product, a producer, or a brand. But anybody that's less or bucking that trend of inflation, we can consider being somewhat saintly. Okay, like I say, broad brush statements tonight. Here's my spreadsheet so that you can see everything. And I know it's just a screen grab of the spreadsheet. You can see down the left-hand side, I've got the producers in column A, and then it moves into brands in column B. And then from there on in, it covers non-age statement, entry-level products. So if you had like Ardbeg Wee Beastie, a 5-year-old, for example, Lagavulin 8 is an 8-year-old, or the non-age statement entry-level stuff, it'd be in that column. Then we've got a 10 or a 12-year-old, kind of more standard entry-level core range columns. Then it moves into the 14, 15, 16-year-old, kind of mid-premium tier. And then it starts to get into the premium stuff, 17 and 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 25-year-old. I've also added in a cast strength. There's lots of people out there with a batch strength, cast strength, higher ABV, Aberlour Buna, Tamdu batch strength, Buna having 12 cast strength. All of these kind of things have come along. Some of them come along much more recently. And I've started to kind of catalogue some of those too in order to give us as big a picture as possible. Okay, so let's get torn right into the first section. Saints will be marked by a wee up arrow and a grey box, because even if it's increased in price, if it's bucking that 25% inflation, we can say that the price increases are measured or better than expected. And the people that are beyond 25% and upwards price increases, of which there are many, believe me, we can consider them in tonight's parlance, we can talk about them as being sinners, okay? So that's what we're looking at. Let's start off with saints. Let's start off with the ones that have been performing well. I can't see the chat right now, so as soon as I've gone through this list, I'll drop back into the chat and pick up with your comments. I'm going to share with you the saints and the sinners, and I'll get your feedback on it. I'm going to share with you first brands. So as an example of a brand, I'll hold this Benriach up again. That is a brand. Benriach 16 is the individual expression, a product. And of course, the producer of that product would be Brown-Forman Group. The top 10 average increases by brand. But when I say top 10 in this context, I'm speaking about the people who have increased the least. That's how we define a saint. Joint ninth, kicking things off, we've got two producers, Kilchoman and Edredar, two favourites, enthusiast favourites. Now, they have increased by 12% both individually, but there's a but over both of them. We love the products. The Edredar, an example here, is a 12-year-old product, of course, Caledonian. I have to say that despite it sneaking into the top 10 here, that's always been a pricey product. It's always been £50 to £60, and it's still in that realm. It's maybe creeping into the 60 odd pounds now, but it hasn't seen a huge price hike because it's always been quite pricey. That said, it's good and it's loved and it's enjoyed, and it's pretty small batch. It's pretty scarce liquid. Kilchoman, this is only measuring their Machir Bay. If we were to put in some of their more premium products, I think we would see a much bigger hike here. But of course, the more premium stuff tends to be small batch, single cask, limited release, that type of thing. Think, for an example, an extreme example would be their 16-year-old that they released at £204, an extremely expensive thing that had a lot of their fan base a wee bit upset. It ended up being academic because the thing sold out regardless, because it was a pretty small outturn. So I suppose go home and feel like they were justified in charging £204 for a 16-year-old product. But I was one of the people who decided not to buy it. I did get a chance to try it, and it was pretty good from my perspective. Am I upset that I didn't get a bottle? Not really, not at £204. Joint 7th, Benriach, just mentioned to you Benriach, and Ardmore, both with a 10% increase for these two producers here. Benriach, they've completely gone through a rebrand. I'm not comparing the same products from 2020 to 2025. They are completely different. But what we see with Benriach is, I feel, a wee bit of a cheapening of the product. Certainly the 10-year-old product is now much more diluted. That's certainly true for the 16-year-old product. We've got a 43% chill filter product now, where in the past we had stuff that was much, much more natural. So the Brown-Forman sensibilities and philosophies have been leveraged a wee bit there. There are still natural releases available from Benriach. It's not right across the board. But I'm going to suggest to you that the reason that we've not seen such a hike there, despite the rebrand, is that they've been able to bring the products out a bit cheaper and still maintain their profits, I guess. Ardmore is a wee bit different. Ardmore's only really long-term official release. There are occasionally you do see the other. I think it's a port cask release, but generally the one we'll be speaking about here is Ardmore Legacy, a non-age statement release. And that's very, very inexpensive. I think back in 2020, you were picking it up for £27 to £30. And here we're in the order of £30 to £33 still. So incremental price increase. Joint 5th, Fettercairn and Speyside. Now, Fettercairn had just released a brand new range in 2019, and that 12-year-old was already expensive. And it's still around the same price today. Fettercairn, therefore, has not seen much of a price hike because of the rebrand that was just before I started to take the data with the price hikes. That's what we see there. Speyside Distillery, that's for the typical, the Trutina, the non-age statement type things from Speyside Distillery. Again, already a wee bit pricey, but we've not seen much in the way of price increases from them. Two for joint third here. We've got Tullibardine and Tamnavulin. Maybe you're starting to pick up a bit of a pattern here. Tullibardine and Tamnavulin, I don't want to be unfair here, but certainly for Tamnavulin, they tend to be high volume, 40% releases, bottom shelf, single malts, price sensitive. I'm not making any judgment on the quality or the sipping. I don't have much exposure to them these days, but I remember when the Tamnavulin double cask non-age statement came out back in the day, a lot of us were surprised how good it could actually be. And when we were picking it up for £20, we were okay, we were relaxed with it, and it was doing a good job. Tullibardine, I have very few Tullibardines, official Tullibardines on the shelf here. There's one or two with higher ABV that are worthy of your time, that are not too expensive, but these are based on the core range products, most of them non-age statement. 6% increases for those two brands. In second place in our Saints list tonight, we've got, believe it or not, a Beam Suntory brand, Laphroaig. Now, I suspect this is because they are chasing and maintaining high volume, huge exports, especially for things like their non-age statement entry-level product, their 10-year-old, their quarter cask. And over the course of the last 5 years, in our market here, locally at least, we've seen very little movement in Laphroaig's prices. Now, I think once you get below double digits, you're in single-digit percentage points here. For all intents and purposes, we're speaking about, we're well within the margin of just general price fluctuations from one retailer to the next, 1 month to the next, that type of thing. So there's not a lot separating the top 10 here. Number 1, Jura. Jura is the brand with the least amount of price increases in the last 5 years. That is a wee bit to me like the Tamnavulin, like the Tullibardine, like Ardmore's Legacy, because Jura has typically been something that we associate with that type of product, that type of market. Let's just catch up here. A dram come in from Seaweed World. That's Sherry Canary. Good to see you. A dram for you in honour of my oldest son, who turns 41 tomorrow. Best Valentine's Day present ever. Fantastic, Sherry. So good to have you in. Sherry Sakamoto there out in Japan. Thank you. No, you're not in Japan. You're in Canada. Sorry. Thank you very much for your dram. I'll put a wee like there as well, Sherry. It's wonderful to have you in. Just pour something in the glass so I can raise a wee glass to you too. Because this is, believe it or not, a Jura. And I don't have many Juras on the shelf, certainly not official Juras, despite there being very, very many of them around. And not too expensive too, it would seem. Cheers, Sherry. Cheers to you. But this one I've been enjoying. It's been on the vPub a couple of times in the past. This is a brand new angle, a brand new take on Jura. It's quite sweet. I always forget just how sweet this whiskey is. It's quite a sweet whiskey. 16-year-old age statement. Look at what's written underneath that age statement there. I know it'll be tough for you to read that there. I don't know if the camera's going to pick up. I need a light behind the camera, don't I? Non-chill filtered, natural colour. What? 46.5% ABV. This is a real page turner for Jura. This is a whole new chapter. This is natural, official Jura. This Perspective's a one release, 16 years old, fully natural, 69.95 in the UK. It's not available everywhere, but it's starting to make its way out to online retailers here, there, and everywhere. And now we're at the point where we've always been suspicious that Jura always were making decent whiskey, and with skilled hands putting it together, they had the ability to do much better than they were doing. But their model was to chase high volume. Their model was to get something that they could sell cheaply and they could discount and they could put through multiples like supermarkets and things in the UK, things that they could make as inexpensive as possible. 40% typically, 42%, 44%, all of these odd ABVs. And anytime we tried a Jura, there was nothing that made us want to go back, and that's me being polite. Some of them were very, very poor. This is not that. And it's not just me banging on about a natural whiskey, natural colour, non-chill filtered, 46% ABV, good age statement. It's all of those things. And somebody who's cared about putting together the best version of Jura that they can and still managed to turn a profit putting it out there at 70 quid. This is not going to make you sing. This is not the most beautiful whiskey you've ever had. But this is the best official Jura I've ever had, certainly in memory. I would have to go back to maybe 10, 12, maybe even longer than that, years ago, where I actually enjoyed spending time with a bottle of official Jura. There was previous 16-year-old, was it the Durex Honor? Was that the 16-year-old that was previous, or the Prophecy? Was that an honest statement? Can't remember. I think Prophecy was one with the eye on it. I'm going back some time now. And these were decent bottles. They really were. But they were not natural. This is natural. Natural Jura. The reason that they're at the top of that chart that I've just shown you, though, the reason that they have the least amount of price increases is that they are very, very aggressive. Their route to market is very aggressive, and it's all based on price. And through that strategy, by volume, Jura has become the best-selling malt in the United Kingdom. Through supermarkets, through multiples. So it remains an attractive business avenue. I think the margins must be razor thin. I think there are better ways to make profit, but I don't know anything about that. I'm just speaking to you as Roy, the enthusiast. But it can be both. There are other producers out there that have shown us that they can do both. Tomatin, Loch Lomond, just to name two. That you can put multiples out, products out there through the supermarkets multiples, and you can put good quality, interesting natural whiskies out there too, and cater for both markets. I'm very, very grateful that we have something official from Jura. Anthony saying the Jura 16 non-chill filtered natural colour is really good. Each bottle has a unique label. Also, I understand that's right. They've got these kind of geometric style labels, so they must cut it out of a huge sheet or something to make sure that each label is going to be a slightly different pattern on it. A nice wee touch. Fruity, aromatic, and coastal. I would go with the fruity, certainly aromatic. Being whiskey, whether or not it's coastal, I'd leave that down to you. Regardless, it's like I say, it's the best Jura I've had in a while. Access to Scotch is in. Good to see you. I bought that Jura 16 and it's great. Glad that you're enjoying it too, buddy. Danny Hempton still got half a bottle of Jura 10 that my older brother brought around 20 years ago. I wasn't really into whiskey then, but I remembered it being awful stuff. Well, if you've still got half a bottle, tuck in. See what it's like, Danny, these days. Ginger Genius is saying most of the Saints list seems familiar to my local supermarket. I think that they are. I think it's going to be a theme that we pick up. That's going to be one of the themes, definitely, John, that we are going to cover tonight and we're going to be able to focus in on. That new Lafroig Elements 2 hits the pocket pretty hard, though. Lafroig Elements 2, I haven't even picked up on that one, Rick. Let me know how much they're asking you to pay for it and what the specs are. Whisky Uncorked is saying, I imported. Nice to have you in. Is that Brian? Good to have you here, Brian. Give your channel a wee plug. Really enjoying the content, really enjoying the contemplative nature that you have. Very easy content to relax with. Loving it. So Whisky Uncorked is in tonight saying, I imported a Jura 16 and from a matter of perspective, I bought a Jura 12 for the first time. Perspective series name is justified, completely different experience. But we know this, don't we, Brian? We know that we maybe not always can tell the difference between a non-chill filtered and a chill filtered, a natural colour and in a product that's colour added to it. We maybe don't know every time, but we know from all of our experience drinking malt whiskey, sipping malt whiskey and enjoying lots and lots of expressions of malt whiskey over the years that the stuff that draws us in, the stuff that hooks us, the stuff that we end up accumulating bottles of tends to be natural whiskey. It's just, widely speaking, much better. Aquavite, Jimmy's saying stop relaxing. Sometimes, especially recently, Jimmy, I've been looking for ways to relax and things like that. And Brian over at Whisky Uncorked has been giving me an opportunity to do that from time to time. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so let's get into the sinners now. I've shared with you what the who the Saints were in the top 10, but of course, if we're still sticking on brands, now I need to let you know who the Saints are. The sinners are too. And this is when those percentages are going to give you make your toes curl. Here we go. Top 10 average increases. We're still talking about by brand. So this is the naughty list. Coming in at number 10, we've got Glenturret. 47% price hike. Now, to be fair to Glenturret, they took an original 43% range that was chill filtered and they've completely transformed it and turned it around. So the prices that we're comparing this against is for a different range. They have completely gone in a different direction. Yes, they've gone much more upmarket. Yes, they've gone much more premium. But at the same time, they've given us more whiskey. Most of the ABVs are up there. Most of it is natural. Most of it is age statement. You remember how much I raved about the original 2020 maiden release of that 12-year-old Glenturret. I thought it was a fantastic experience. So we have to caveat that huge price increase with getting some more whiskey along too. However, what I will say, after the maiden releases, we've seen Glenturret continue to climb in price. And I think things are starting to get far too greedy, especially for the more premium or more expensive, the more mature products. Number 9, Glenglassaugh, again, a story of rebranding. Back in 2020, I would have been looking at things like Torfa and Evolution. And they were 50% ABV, all natural whiskies, fantastic things. What we've seen with Glenglassaugh now is a slight watering down of that. The 12-year-old, we've seen at 45%, which is weird. We know it's chill filtered. We believe it's natural colour. But we've also seen a bit of a hike on price there too. Then they've got the 2 non-age statement, a higher ABV, really quite fantastic products. That's Portsoy and Sandend. But we've seen Glenglassaugh again through that rebranding go for a bit of a price hike. And they were so close with that 12-year-old, they could have made that natural. 48% increase. Number 8, first mention of a Diageo product tonight. It will not be the last. Mortlach. Specifically here, we're talking about the official releases of the 12 and 16-year-old product. 49% jump in standard official bottles of Mortlach. If you see the prices that they're asking for the special releases, it's even more eye-watering. I never understand what Diageo are trying to do with Mortlach. It's one of these super geeky enthusiast type, really out there, extreme on the flavour bandwidth products that's really loved by connoisseurs, enthusiasts, whiskey folk, whiskey botherers love Mortlach, but it's increasingly taken out of our hands and crowbar level premiumization. And they've never once brought a product that's actually hooked anyone. Anyway, I'll get more chances to have a go at Diageo a bit later. 7, Glendronach. We're seeing this play out in real time right now. Obviously, the takeover by Brown-Forman in recent years for Glendronach. We're seeing that even the 12-year-old has bumped up in price. But once we start to get to the 15-year-old, it starts to become uncomfortable, increases in price. And we've seen a near doubling in price of the 18-year-old from Glendronach as well. Again, they're definitely one of the sinners here when it comes to price increases, 49%. Number 6, Glenfarclas, huge leaps in the prices for Glenfarclas. And I'm not speaking really much about the Glenfarclas 105, the batch strength one, obviously cast strength. I'm not really speaking about the 10-year-old or the 12-year-old either. What we're speaking about here is 15-year-old and upwards. Certainly the 21-year-old, 25-year-old, 21-year-old is very hard to get now. I think it might be discontinued. 25-year-old is almost tripled in price in recent years. And it's not because we've seen a tripling in quality. Believe me, Glenfarclas is still as all over the place as it's always been. For every absolute banging bottle you get, you can pick up another one that's half as good. It's just the way that it is. This is frightening to me to see and measure just how expensive Glenfarclas has become for, to my eye, no justifiable reason, not even a rebranding. Caol Ila, 70%. Now, we've seen a jump in the retail prices of the standard ubiquitous Caol Ila 12, but what this is hugely affected by is the £140, £145 that we used to pay for Caol Ila 25. One day we just woke up and it was 250. Then another day we woke up, it was 360. And in a retail in 2024, I saw Caol Ila 25 going for over £400 at retail. The prices that you're paying today is anywhere between that 250 and 360, and that's what accounts for this huge increase in the prices of Caol Ila. Position 4, another Diageo product for no sane reason whatsoever, Oban 14. We know it's quite scarce liquid. We know there's not a lot of it around, but Oban, 14-year-old Oban, has been a staple for decades. For it to suddenly, overnight, and this was overnight, jump from the prices that it was at, the affordable, attainable prices, to, in some retail outlets, almost doubling overnight is just inexcusable. 78% from Oban. Let's get into the top 3. Top 3 sinners by brand, Talisker. You knew it was going to be here, but I bet you're surprised to see that it's been beaten by 2. This is not anything to do with Talisker Sky. It's not even to do with Talisker 10-year-old or Talisker Storm or Dark Storm or any of those things. You know as well as I know that this Talisker price increase is based fully on the exact same thing that happened with Oban. Overnight, it went from being an 80 quid bottle to being 195 and then 245. Ridiculous insanity just by the mere fact that it's got 18. So that's taken the whole brand and really cranked it right up. 81% price increase, average price increase for Talisker as a brand. Position 2, beating Talisker, comfortably beating Talisker, is Dalmore. Of course it is, it's Dalmore. They're not going to do anything to make the whiskey better. They're not going to make it any way more kind of premium. They're not going to make it more natural. No, they're just going to polish the glass a wee bit more and make sure that stag's head is nice and shiny and blingy, and they're just going to charge more for it because they are trying to eat into Macallan's market. They're just trying to behave like they are as good as Macallan. And that is just going to get you into trouble at some point. Who is paying these prices for Dalmore? We don't even talk about Dalmore. I've got Jura on my shelf, but I do not have any official Dalmore. None of it. I'm just not interested in any of it. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Position number 1. So what's beaten Oban, Talisker and Dalmore? Well, there's a story, and it is Longmorn. Longmorn. A bit like Mortlach, where they just take one of these kind of enthusiast things, one of these really, really loved single malts, something that's really prized by many, and they just slap an arbitrary, ridiculous luxury lifestyle price on it. So the Secret Speyside Longmorn 18 that everyone fell in love with, we absolutely loved it. I've raved about it over the years on the vPub. I've only got a wee bit of it left now. It's sold out now. It's difficult to get hold of, but you can still pick it up. It's secondary and it's not going for particularly high prices. So what makes Longmorn think that they can bring out another 18-year-old and more than double the price? It's horrendous to see it. I know that it's at cask strength. I noticed today, actually, or maybe yesterday, I think it was earlier today, Whisky has just dropped a video on this. I've not had a chance to go and watch it. I don't know what the outcome of that is, but I think by looking at the thumbnail and the title, he's comparing the Secret Speyside 18-year-old, one of his favourites, with the new 18-year-old. So he looks like he shelled out the money for the cask strength, new premiumised Longmorn. But to me, that is absolutely frightening. Let's grab some of the chat from you guys as we pull that back. So that's our brands out of the way. That's me shared with you who the saints are, who the people that are performing well under inflation, and the people that are performing way over inflation. Stevie O, my pal Stevie, has just gifted 20 Aquavitae Barfly memberships out to everyone. Stevie, thank you very much for your generous support and keeping the Barfly numbers nice and healthy. Cheers, Stevie. Let's open my next bottle before I go into what order will we do these in? I think we'll do it round that way. Before we go into the next section, I shared a slide to tell you that I've been looking at 30 different producers over 76 brands. So that means that if there's 30, if I'm doing the top 10 and the bottom 10, there's going to be 10 producers that are just kind of somewhere in the middle. And if you work that forward, 76, there's going to be 10 and 10 and the brands, and over 150 products, individual products. So there's going to be a lot of products out there in the middle somewhere that's maybe not going to be mentioned tonight. But this exercise did throw up a couple of standouts that I thought, that looks good value and I've not touched it in a wee while. Why don't I invest? And that's what I've done. And the first one that I picked up was this Glenmorangie. This is the Quinta Ruban. So this is bourbon cask matured, then finished for a number of years. I think it's 3 or 4 year finish in port casks. Certainly a nice rich colour. Now, being Glenmorangie, we fully believe it to be, just as I've lost my chat again, this seems to be happening every week now. I don't know if it's anything to do with my... It's very frustrating when that happens. I just need to open the chat window again. Apologies. I don't know if it's anything to do with my computer or whether it's the connection or whatever, but I've got you all back now. But this 14-year-old Quinta Ruban is 46% ABV. Now, there are other products out there that's 46% ABV, and we just have to assume that it could be natural, it could be unchill filtered. But this one actually says unchill filtered on the box. I don't know if it says on the bottle. It might say in small text on the back, not very sure, but I can tell you for sure that it says non-chill filtered on the back there. I hope you can see it right about there. So we know it's natural, 46% ABV, age statement. This is a fully natural Glenmorangie product. And I know that we've got quite a few Glenmorangie fans, let's say, out there in our community. I'm certainly one of them. I've talked about the 10-year-old for years. It's just been bumped up, the original, to a 12-year-old product. Still at 40% in the UK. I would love to see a bourbon matured Glenmorangie original, fully natural, 46%, maybe a wee annual special edition. What do you think? Glenmorangie, can you give us that? I'd love to try it. But this is natural, and this was a very, very good price. For a 14-year-old product, this was 60 quid. It won't glug, but we'll try. A wee glug. So we've got the kind of burnished, kind of copper, magenta, kind of flushed, almost rusty tones, and that gives away the port cask right away. I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up in the camera. It's just kind of looking like a kind of generic copper burnished color. But I can see in the glass here, especially if against a white background, you can see there's a kind of magenta flush through this. It tends to give away wine cask or port cask. And there's certainly a red berry blackcurrant type damson jam. This smells like spearmint gum. There's such a minty, fresh, cool, so it's like a cooling sensation, and it gives this sensation of a mintiness. I've never had that before. But a lot of red fruits, a lot of jams. Quite a pleasant nose. Some tea, some fruit tea, some tannic elements. Sweet apple, overripe apple, mulchy apple, overripe pear, that kind of note, orchard, ripe orchard. I'm kind of looking for malt and floral notes and things, but it's just from the neck pour, that's what's becoming across obvious. I'm quite struck by the mintiness here. Once you get a note like that in whiskey, you start to pick it up in lots of other whiskies too. So sometimes you go looking for it and you can find it. Other times it just hits you like that did there. Wow. Anyway, cheers, everyone. Bags of fruit. Fruity, fruity, fruity. Jam, red fruit, salt. I'm thinking about that mintiness thing again. It's still here a wee bit, but the overall sensation is that this is quite cool. There's a cooling sensation to this. Lots of fruit, decent finish, really quite surprising. Again, I've got Glenmorangie Original is always on the shelf here, alongside one or two other kind of. I've got a Sauterne up there. It's in the distance, which is what's it called? Nectar d'Or, would that be right? And I think it's said Sauterne. And I'm just trying to see if I can see any other of the Glenmorangies on the shelf. But it's been probably a decade since I've had Quinta Ruban. Could that be true? Maybe not. But it's been a long time. This is certainly a new branding. But all natural whiskey, 46% ABV. It used to be a 12-year-old. They've bumped it up to 14. Unchill filtered, printing it on the box. This is natural whiskey for 60 quid from an official large producer. In our realms, this is nice whiskey. I'm not drawn to port casks, but this is actually quite, I'll say it, this is quite delicious. We're not drawn to this. This is not a cool brand for us, right? As whiskey geeks, whiskey botherers. This Glenmorangie is for me, it's a sentimental thing. I love Glenmorangie. I love the original. I always have. I've got multiple vintages of it. I've got stuff going back to the 70s even. But this type of thing is not something that we're picking up quite often. But consider a lot of other people out there in the bigger, wider whiskey world that maybe don't have the access to all of our independent bottlings and things. It's very rare to see an independent Glenmorangie, right enough. But they've perhaps got this sitting on the shelf. And if we're not talking about it, if we're not sharing it, then to suggest to them that if this is priced well, this might be a decent product for them to pick up, especially if it's the newer one with a higher ABV, higher age statement, that type of thing. And certainly when they're deciding to type and print the words non-chill filtered on the box. Like I say, it has to be at the right price. And I think to get a 14-year-old all-natural official product from a luxury brand, let's say, at this price today is something else. So you find these things. Jonathan Flowers is in. Good to see you, buddy. He's saying Aquavita, and they didn't bump up the price when they added the 2 years. And that's also true of the original as well. Peter Hunt is saying we had the old Quinta Ruban in our Xmas Advent blind drams, and it went down a storm. Hope the new version lives up to it. I have to say, I'm quite struck. You've seen me surprised by things in the past on the vPub. It's not going to blow anyone away, but what we've actually got is a really easy to recommend solid fruity whiskey that allows people to connect with port cask maturation. Nectar d'Or is one of the worst Scotch whiskies on earth, says Jimmy Legg. Nectar d'Or is also lower ABV as well. I wouldn't suggest to anyone that it's one of the worst on earth, but we know how direct Jimmy is. But I'm also not in a hurry to go against him and start recommending it to everyone. I was quite disappointed when I tried it on the vPub, I remember. And if I look at the fill level in that bottle now, I can see that that's ridiculously high level. I'm just going to double check that that's the right one. Let me grab it. I can show you. So I don't know when this was. I don't remember when I opened it, but I opened it on a vPub. It might have been an ignored vPub session or something. But it's the old previous branding of the Nectar d'Or. This one, forgive me, is 46%. I'm glad I went and grabbed it and checked. I was right about the Sauterne cask, but yeah, Nectar d'Or. And I remember being a wee bit, and you can see how much, the fill level always gives it away. There's really not been much out of that in all the time it's been open. So I would maybe lean towards Jimmy and saying that's not the one. But the 14-year-old Quinta Ruban, I have to say that's quite a juicy little treat. I'm enjoying that, and I'm enjoying that more than I expected to. Drew from Arizona, I confess to having bought a bunch of the 12-year-old Quinta Rubans when I heard they were being phased out. Still has a great place in my heart for tuning me onto this type of whiskey. Perfect, Drew. What kind of port cask does it say? No, it doesn't. It does not. And in fact, on the bottle, it only says bourbon and port casks. Now, there might be more you can discover by going on the website or something. So it talks about Glenmorangie generally, 14 years aged in bourbon and port. Our prize-winning Quinta Ruban is like a delicate forest, where notes of mandarin orange, dark chocolate, oh my goodness, and peppermint entwine. Peppermint, spearmint. Ooh. Huh. It's not just the green packaging that puts you in the mind of mintiness then. It's like a cool breeze mintiness. That's incredible. Okay, peppermint, spearmint. So there you go. It doesn't say anything about the specific port cask, Jimmy. I know that you do want to know, is it ruby port, is it tawny port, all of these things. Wee bit like sherry, we're often left in the dark. Reboot Aquavitae, take it from the ITGUI, saying, oh, I know, okay, yes, reboot, exactly that. So what happened is that the fan went fast in the computer and the Chrome window fell over. As long as this Chrome window doesn't fall over, because that's the one that the broadcast has gone out on. Okay, interesting stuff. A decent wee bottle to open there. But I've got more stuff to share with you. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into the products. So I want to finish on producers. So we'll just kind of name and shame the companies. And I don't mean name and shame. These are all just based on my numbers that I'm gathering for my own personal view and perspectives, and I'm going to share those perspectives and views with you tonight. But I'll keep the companies, I'll keep the owner companies till last and tell you, because we know we all want to say, oh, Diageo's gone nuts recently, and we know in our mind Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, we know these people who are seemingly in our mind, anecdotally, I would argue, seeming to be more expensive, becoming greedy, artificially hiking prices. Let's have a wee look and see. Danny Hebden is saying, it looks like an After Eight mince box. It really does, Danny. That's what I was thinking, and maybe that's the subliminal thing. It's so sweet, Aquavitae is sickly. So that's Jimmy talking about the Sauterne Nectar d'Or potentially. Whisky 101, that's Nick. How you doing, Nick? He's saying Glenfarclas is still cheap here. Just checked. 10-year-old is €24, 15.56. 25 is €174. I don't think it was much cheaper here in 2020. No, you've still got the old stock. When the new stock comes through, Nick, that's going to bump up in price. I'm not suggesting you run out and buy it up, because the 25-year-old Glenfarclas, I'm not sure it's €174 worth. Some of them have been gorgeous, other ones have been poor, honestly. Henrik Schmidt is saying, G Whisky praises the new Longmorn 18-year-old as high as the former. Same gorgeous whisky, different profile though, and a remarkably different price as well. It really is. Anyway, let's share with you the products by Saints first. These are the top 10 that have bucked the inflation trend. So remember, anything under 25% is arguably doing very, very well for us. And getting much, much lower than that, we need to start talking about it. So I'm going to focus on the top 10 here. And we're going to start with, I just need to make sure I'm on the right screen. We're going to start with position 10, Tamnavulin, non-age stated. So these are individual products, expressions I'm talking about now. So this Tamnavulin is likely to be your sherry cask, your double cask, those ubiquitous expressions you see in supermarkets. They tend to be very, very inexpensive. And back in the day, like I say, at £20, but you can still pick these up for £25, less than £30. They're one of the cheapest single malt Scotch whiskies available on the shelves today. None of them, I have to say, I'm in a particular rush to go out and recommend. That said, if you're sitting there enjoying your time with a wee glass, a wee bottle of Tamnavulin, and you're loving the different ranges that they bring out, the different takes on it, there is nothing wrong with that. Your road ahead and exploration of whiskey is going to be really, really quite interesting, though. 6% increase. Position number 9, though, we've got a Tullibardine. 4% increase. And specifically, what's interesting about this one is it's got a decent age statement on there. In the last 5 years, that 15-year-old Tullibardine has only crept up 4% in price. And it's interesting, Tullibardine and Picard as a company is going to get a couple of mentions throughout tonight, and it tends to be mostly in a very positive light. Number 8, position number 8 is Balblair 25-year-old Balblair. Only 3%. Huge caveat with this one, though. You might remember that in 2019, Balblair had that huge rebranding. 12, 15, 18, 25, the whole range had a huge hike in price from our perspective. So where you were able to get a decent vintage with a really good age statement, well into the teenage years, well into maybe 20 years and beyond, for really quite inexpensive prices, Balblair's rebranding changed all of that and made them look really quite expensive. And it's taken the last 5 or 6 years for everything else to catch up. So they couldn't really put the prices up anymore because the stuff wasn't shifting. Anyway, they've kept pretty static. Like I say, when we're down at 643%, it's next to no difference. That's pretty static. Then joint 4th position, we've got 4 different brands, different products, all at 0% increase. The exact same prices. When I did this exercise back in 2020, they are at the exact same prices today. 2 are understandable. Benriach 10-year-old is because of the thing I talked about earlier with Benriach. It's different specs. It's diluted now. The Benriach 10-year-old is lower ABV. It's chill filtered. All of these kind of things. That said, credit where credit's due. The price has stayed pretty reasonable over the last 5 years. Auchentoshan 12-year-old. Let's say nothing about quality. Let's say nothing about engagement here. Let's say nothing about what this is as a product, but it was recently reviewed by one of the writers on Dramface. He didn't seem to be having a great time with it. I would suggest to you that they've kept the price static at the expense of quality. But that said, it's Auchentoshan 12-year-old was never something anyone was screaming about. It's one of those Beam Suntory distilleries, a bit like Bamore, that just gets abused. It's heartbreaking, it really is. But look at these two, Leadchick 10-year-old and Tobermory 12-year-old. Brother and sister, you might think, both from the same distillery, but I can tell you over the last 5 or 6 years, that price is pretty static. Manufacturers recommended RRPs somewhere in the order of 45 quid, something like that. And it was like that back in 2020. You can regularly pick them up a bit cheaper than that, maybe sub £40. But I haven't gone into sale prices, flash sale prices, discounts, special offers, anything like that. I've looked at what the general price you would have to pay if you wanted to pick up a bottle today in 2025. No price increase for Lechick and Tobermory. Top 3 Saints. Benriach 16-year-old, the one I opened up tonight with. Much the same as the 10-year-old. We've got a cheapened product over what was available previously. But literally cheapened. It's been made cheaper. So can we complain? I'm sorry, I can. Take the 7%, take the money, take the extra money and give me it natural. Don't chill filter it. Don't give me it at 43%. Give me it at 46%. And I bet you I would be having a slightly better experience than I have with that 16-year-old opened with tonight. That said, it is one of the cheapest 16-year-old whiskies you can buy right now. Number 2, Laphroaig's 18-year-old has dropped in price by 8%. Now that's a bit scatty. Another huge caveat here. Sometimes when the Laphroaig 18-year-old was, but depending on how big a batch it was, maybe, depending on the feeling and the mood at the time. But back in 2020, that was £190. And today, a Laphroaig 18-year-old you can pick up for £175, more or less, give or take. So we've seen a drop in price for Laphroaig 18-year-old. Again, no commenting on quality here. This is just me sharing prices with you. I don't have a Laphroaig 18-year-old, and I can't tell you the last time I did. Top place in the Saints list for bucking the inflation trend is Jura 12-year-old. Now this is similar, isn't it? This is something that we've seen, we've talked about. Look at Tamnavulan's in here, Tullibardin's in here, Auchentoshan's in here. We've got these high volume products that are forced to, they have to remain aggressively priced in order to be bought up. I suspect that's why that is there. Let's not break this time. Let's just run straight into the top 10 sinners by product. So these have all made the Saints list. 25%, anything under is a good performance. So to see this 6 all the way down to -12, actually a reduction in price, it's quite incredible, right? Anyway, here goes. Look at the percentages here. Strap in. At number 10, Bowmore's 18-year-old. Despite the fact that you cannot recommend this product, despite the fact that Bowmore make one of the best malts on the planet, and yet what they bottle never, ever seems to live up to what they actually make. I don't know why that is, but they've decided that just because they're putting an 18-year-old out there, it doesn't matter that it's 40%, maybe 43% export, but locally, domestically, it's 40% ABV. Because it's got an 18-year-old age statement on there, they've got to be seen to be not too cheap, so the price gets bumped up, and you're going to see a pattern here. Number 9, Tomintoul's 21-year-old. Again, a 70% increase in price for no other reason than it's 21 years old. Ultra low ABV single malt whiskey, stripped. It's a shame because of the malt that we know that could be if it was left alone, nothing stripped, nothing taken out of it, nothing added. 21-year-old Tomintoul would be, I suspect, amazing. I don't want to pay 70% more for it, but I would probably pay more than what it was going around for in 2020. Position 8, Dalmore's 15-year-old. Look at that price increase there, 72% in 5 years, for no other reason than they want it to be seen to be aspirational. We know that this is a thing. It's not exclusive to whiskey. Number 7, 76% for Glendronach's Allardyce. This was a £90 bottle. And now we're up at what, 180, 185, 190, those kind of prices going from memory. It's shot up hugely. The price that I was taking in 2020 would have been closer to £120. But the last time I picked up a bottle, I think it was £90. Number 6, Oban 14-year-old. We've already mentioned Oban as a brand. Here it is as a product. Obviously, the product and brand is one and the same because there's the Distiller's Edition, there's Oban Little Bay, there's other wee things out there as well. But generally speaking, we're talking about the ubiquitous 14-year-old, shot up in price by 78%. Position 5, the percentages are still getting bigger. Kalila, 25 years old. I've already mentioned it, already talked about it. Something you could pick up for £145 is now more than double. It is not worth it. It is not worth it. It's a good whiskey. It's enjoyable, delicious even, elegant, 43% though, absolutely chill filtered, absolutely coloured, or they reserve the right to colour it, and it's doubled in price simply because of that age statement. Position 4, there's the Glenfarclas thing going on there. Now, I appreciate Nick in the Europe has not been asked to pay these prices yet, but it's coming, Nick, I'm telling you. Glenfarclas 25-year-old in the UK is more than doubled in the last 5 years. Still, we're getting worse. Position 3, and here it is, your Longmorn 18-year-old that we've been discussing. They've given us cask strength now, but they've gone from something that was originally £90, then it was £105, £110, £116, kind of creeping up in prices for the Secret Space side. They've now discontinued that range, and they've brought out a super luxurious 18-year-old, cask strength, more than double the price. It's a huge, huge ask. And we know that it's not because it's taken that much more to make the thing. This is just purely product positioning. Number 2, Dalmore's 18-year-old. For much the exact same reason as Dalmore 15-year-old, but even more so on the 18-year-old, because Macallan is double the price of Dalmore. So that means that people out there in certain markets will look at it and say, it must be twice as good. So Dalmore are just following Macallan. They just want to be Macallan. They just want to eat into Macallan's market share. That's what they're chasing. So of course Dalmore 18 has gone up 183% in 5 years. Crazy. So who tops the tree here? It'll surprise some of you, but not so much others. It is, of course, the famous story from a couple of years ago, Talisker 18-year-old. The last time I picked up Talisker 18-year-old, it was £79 Royal Mile whiskies. Back when I took this price, the data set in 2020, the retail that I was going for then was £77. Now we see it up as far as £245. Some places have it a bit more. I was almost going to say reasonable, but there's no way I can use that word. Some places have it for less than 200. Just depends on what stock they bought when, but it's just ridiculous. It's just pure positioning. 218% increase in price. 10 times the inflation rate in those same amount of years. What say you as I reach for another bottle? Glendronach, Jimmy Legacy and Glendronach 12-year-old has doubled here. It's laughable. Justin Wan is saying Oban actually has stayed fairly static in Hong Kong. It's coming, Justin. Doodle Drama is saying it's like talking about German cars nowadays. Passat for 70k. Yeah. A Passat for 70k. It must be a nice one, though, surely. Kyle Taylor is saying we probably need to put an asterisk on that Glendronach, seeing as it was potentially 23 years old 5 years ago. They're selling it on the reputation of the older one now. Kyle, I'm going to suggest to you throughout the course of this evening that dynamic you've just touched upon there is prevalent everywhere. We've got problems right now that we're dealing with as enthusiasts. We know, we taste it, we feel it, we know it. It's none of our business because it's to do with business. However, there are dynamics affecting the quality that's in the bottle right now. It's not conspiracy theorist nonsense. It's not me banging on about natural whiskey or whatever. These are just common sense things that I think we're going to talk about as we summarize. Sometimes I'm able to summarize and sometimes not so much. My opinion is twice as good as yours, Royce, but I charge the same. Thank you for the dram. Thank you for bringing a smile to my face, Jimmy Leg. It's nice to have you in. And here's to charging twice for the opinions. Cheers. No, you charge the same. but your opinion is worth twice as much. I would agree. My takeaway is that Macallan bumped their prices before Aquavitae started his measure. That 18 is a wild $400 now. Absolutely. I think that when I remember going to the distillery when they opened, so that would have been about 2018 when the new distillery opened, and the price at that time for Macallan 18. But I can tell you right now the number for Macallan 18 if you'd like. I've got it here. And you're absolutely spot on. Macallan, for their 18-year-old, back in 2020 was $285, and today the average price that you're picking it up for is $360. So that's a 26% increase. So despite a huge increase, we're not even. Yeah, I mean, I think it was 63% was the increase for that Bowmore 12 at number 10. So it didn't even get close. And that's got so much to do with, exactly as you say, that the price had already gone up considerably by that time. Let's see where we are now. Why is Macallan not listed? Herben was saying, or did I miss that? Well, that explains it. Despite us knowing how expensive Macallan has become, those price hikes already happened before I started to take my samples in 2020. But you can see other producers such as Glendronach, such as Talisker, such as Dalmore, of course. They're all just trying to follow them. Diageo do it because people will still buy it. Are people still buying Talisker 18? Maybe. Making Ram decision saying, I bought a Talisker 18 at the price read $100 USD on the shelf. When I got up to the cash register, they wanted to charge 170. Horrendous. Obviously, you said no. In the Netherlands, Open is €49. That's because it's not hit there yet. You're probably still sitting on older stock. Those price hikes are coming. I hope they don't. Falscraft is saying, I remember your report from the new Macallan distillery. That was definitely before 2020. And their price increase was even before that. Certainly on the 18-year-old, that's true. All right, let's open another bottle before I go into the last section here, which is going to talk about producers and how much they're charging. There's one more bottle, but I think I can keep it for another topic going forward. Throughout my exploration, I found this might be something of, let's say, not really good value, but suddenly dropped into a price point that I might want to reach out and connect with it again. I first tried this at a vertical tasting. This is a Glen Scotia, and the rep from Glen Scotia at that time came along and did a Glasgow Whisky Club tasting for us. And this was my dram of the night, so much so I bought a bottle, despite the fact that everyone in the club was complaining and grumbling about the price of £85. And this is for Glen Scotia's 18-year-old. But I'm going back to 2018. Now, this specific product, it's non-chill filtered, and it says it's non-chill filtered on the box, but not the bottle. Sorry, on the bottle, but not the box. So it says it here, just on the label, if it focuses here, non-chill filtered. 18-year-old Campbelltown malt whiskey from a time when Glen Scotia was a bit less consistent, I have to say. 2007 vintage, 2006, 2005, that kind of vintage is going to be, it's going into this bottle here. Things were a wee bit erratic, but it's been getting much better recently, to the point, anecdotally, I'll share with you that the best Glen Scotias I've tasted is from fresh bourbon casks, single-digit age statements. Just can be sublime liquid. But this is a completely different product. This is Glen Scotia 18-year-old. This is what everybody would get out there in markets everywhere. We were complaining that it was £85 and that was too expensive in 2018. Well, it's gone up and up and up in price. The last time I looked at Glen Scotia 18, it was 125. However, I picked this one up for just under 110. Still a bit pricey, but less than a lot of 18-year-olds that we're seeing today. Think of Bruichladdich, think of Arran 18 today, think of so many more. The prices are just getting out of hand. I really believe that. We'll talk more about that. So I kind of felt like, okay, 109. When was the last time we had a Glen Scotia 18 on the shelf? Let's have a go. Not particularly. I was looking for something that would give me a suggestion of maturity. Nothing obvious. It's a neck pour. Obviously, I've just opened this in front of you tonight. Does have a nice nose. I want to look for coastal elements. I can find that. But it's not particularly... It's more of a kind of light citrus, light orchard, quite malty. Neck pores, maybe needing to breathe a little bit. I should just be leaving this for a while. Leave the bottle open for a bit, leave it in the glass for a bit, but I'll have a wee sip anyway, see what my first impressions are. Much better on the palate. Much better on the palate. Much better on the palate. Okay, this needs a wee bit of time for the kind of nosing, just to relax a bit and open up. I could maybe do with grabbing my water dropper here, putting a wee splash of water in it to try and help it along a bit. Nice sweet fruits, some white stone fruit coming in there as well, a wee bit of salt, a wee bit of malt, a wee bit of creaminess. We've got Mike Molasses sipping this along with me tonight. I mentioned before we went live, I saw that Mike had Glen Scotia 18 in a glass. Don't know what the batch it is, Mike, of course, but I wonder how you're getting on with it. Nothing in the way of that Campbelltown funk thing. I think that when I talk about Campbelltown funk, I tend to be speaking about Glengyle. I tend to be speaking about certainly Springbank. Much less likely to be getting that kind of mulchy, earthy, funky aroma in palate that we would get in a Springbank. This is much cleaner. It even goes far to say it's a wee bit elegant. Trying to decide between a sweet apple and a sweet citrus. It's just kind of a nice kind of generic fruit bowl here. Malt, a wee bit biscuity. Yeah, it needs time because the palate's great. The palate's fantastic. And I suspect that the palate's going to open up a wee bit. I'm going to be able to pick out more from the palate when I leave it. Certainly, but the nose it's just a wee bit tight. Don't think I'm being fair to this product right now, but I have to say on first approach, on first nosing and first sipping, even at £109, I don't think it's one I can hold up and just really shout and scream about. I suspect that given a wee bit of time, it might be one that I come back to, sip in contrast with some other things. You know, let me reserve the right to change my mind about this going forward. But it's good to have Glen Scotia 18 back on the shelf again. And the only reason I have put it back on the shelf is not because it's specifically come down in price, not because it's particularly screaming great value. If you want a good value 18-year-old, look no further than Deanston's 18-year-old for bourbon and Speyburns 18-year-old for sherry cask. Both of them £90, £85, £80, sometimes a wee bit less on offer. Much better value. Now tell me, are Inverhouse losing money on Speyburn at 18-year-old and selling it at that price? Are Deanston losing money for selling their 18-year-old at that price? No. No. And there may be fluctuation in how much it costs for individual distilleries to make the product. The per litre cost might be different from one individual distillery to another. But listen, it's not that much. By the time it gets to the cheapest, to the cheapest distillery per litre to the most expensive, there's not that much of a difference. Certainly not the distilleries we're focused on tonight. Maybe once you get to Daftmill and Dornoch and these kind of distilleries, the prices go a bit crazy. But the stuff that we're speaking about tonight, if you've got a product out there at 18 years old at £85, there's profit being made on that. If you've got somebody else out there selling on 18-year-olds for £350, they're being very, very deliberate about that pricing. It is not costing them that much more to make that product. We have to be very careful about spending that money because malt whiskey is a very, very tightly controlled thing in terms of how you can make it. So how much extra, how much more experience you're going to get from spending that amount of money on an 18-year-old is not that much. Arnie's saying, I've just been buying whiskey for a year, Aquaviti. Some think I'm used to current prices. Often when browsing online shops and seeing listings of older sold-out bottles, I'm in awe at what it used to be. Me too. I've just told you a wee anecdote there. I've been at the Glasgow Whisky Club in 2018. I think it could be 2017. And we were told it was £85 for this new Glen Scotia 18-year-old. It was just when this branding had arrived. It was fairly new. And we were shocked. £85, that's too expensive. The 15-year-old was about 42, 45, something like that. So it was a big, big jump to the 85. We felt that we're being far too greedy. A wee bit of a hindsight, right? Greg Stafford, good to see you, Greg. Macallan 18 is around 900 Canadian. Just forget about it. Not a slight on the quality whatsoever. It's good quality liquid, it really is. It's not close to that good quality. Poured a Glen Scotia 18 against the Lechic 18 in Deanston last night. The Glen Scotia trailed badly. That's interesting, Tom. We're going back to a time when this whiskey was made at Glen Scotia 18 years ago, that it was under different stewardship, ownership, guidance, philosophy, sensibilities, everything was different back then. The Glen Scotia that's been made today is infinitely more deliberate, more careful, more managed, better quality, cask investment, taking time over the product. I just feel the future for Glen Scotia is so, so, so bright. That said, if I'm going to make comparisons with Glen Scotia, I have to know my way around this while I talk about the newer stuff, right? Jimmy Legg, I look at my Cabernet Aquavita and I'm so happy with what I have and what I paid, even in Canada. But you're a canny soul. You're probably spending most of your night just nosing a single glass, Jimmy. Very careful, very contemplative, a wee bit jaggy, cheeky, a wee bit... all of these things. Your whiskey is going to last you a long time as well. Sachin Quinta's in as well. Good to see you, Sachin. What's the most you would pay for a bottle, Aquavita? This Glen Scotia, I'm not going to comment on that tonight. I think I'm still at the point, based on a neck pour only, neck pour palate, that I don't feel I've had particularly brilliant value, and I've had the same thing happen with my computer again. I'm going to refresh the screen, go back. This is a wee bit worrying. I don't have anything like the budget to invest in new hardware. It's not happening. Just bring the chat back up as quickly as I possibly can. Catch up with your comments. Time for a dram. Jaggy Jimmy is now official and locked in as his name is going forward, Jimmy Legg. How can you have a name like Jimmy Legg and then want to change it to something else, Gregor? Good to see you in. Time for a dram. Good to have you in joining us, buddy. I hope you're doing well out there on the West Coast. Right, pop out chat again. Bring that out. Bring it over here so I can keep up to date with what you guys are into and hope that I don't break that again. Jackie Jimmy. So there we go. Okay, let's share the finale then. Let's share the finale. And of course, there's going to be a wee flourish at the end where we talk about distilleries that have come along since 2020. There's lots of new releases that's come along that have not been available. And I just have a wee kind of summary slide there. But I think what you want to know about is we've done brand, so the individual brands. We've done the products, individual bottle expressions. Now we move into producers. So we're going to do saints and sinners again. We're going to list the top 10 saints, the producers that have kept everything neat. And then we're going to move into the sinners, the top 10 producers that have seen by far the most extreme increases in price since we started recording these prices in 2020. Okay, let's start with the goodies. Joint 8th position. So the top 3 are the same percentage increase, and they are Ian MacLeod Distillers at 23% increase, Loch Lomond, and Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. Now, you might ask me here, wait a minute, 23%, that's really quite a huge increase. But remember, our benchmark here is to try and bring it in under inflation, right? Inflation should be 26. And I would argue with you that for malt whiskey producers, they've had other challenges as well. I'm not just talking about inflation type things like cost of raw materials, the energy and all of that stuff, but we're talking about the tax and duty increases and all of these things that's been super difficult for Scotch malt whiskey production. That said, our benchmark tonight is 25%. That's been the inflation over the last 5 years that we've been taking these numbers. So anybody that's getting under the 25% might slide into the top 10, and that's what's happened here with Loch Lomond Group, LVMH and Ian McLeod. When it comes to Ian McLeod, we have seen increases there on Tamdhu and Glengoyne, but sometimes with the 18-year-old disappearing, the 15-year-old disappearing and coming back at a much higher price, that's hard. But what's keeping that number low is their 10-year-old and their 12-year-old, their value entry products. That's the theme that we're seeing tonight. Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, if you look at the Ardbeg core range, Corryvreckan, Ugidal, Anno, if you look at the 10-year-old from Ardbeg, the Wee Beastie, in the last 5 years, there's been very little creep in price at all. The thing that's making that up at 23% is the more premium Ardbegs. And that's the same for Glenmorangie. Very stable pricing across the group. Loch Lomond, we've seen price increases there, much to do with, less to do with the 12-year-old and the non-age statement stuff, much more to do with our higher age-stated stuff, 14, they're 18, they're 21, these type of products. But we've also seen massive leaps in Loch Lomond's quality. So the fact that they're able to do that and buck the inflation is still quite good. Of course, I'm going to say good things about Loch Lomond because I admitted to you last week I have more Loch Lomond on the shelf than anything else. Now you know where my biases lie, though. Number 7, Inverhouse. We talk about Inverhouse a lot, don't we? So Pulteney and Balblair got their rebrand, didn't they, before 2020? The price hikes were there. If that had happened since I took that original data pool, the data points, this 18% would have been much higher. That said, since 2020, over the Speyburn and over the Anoch releases, we've seen something that can comfortably buck that 25% inflation over the 5 years. So they come in the top 10 of the Saints. Number 6, position 6 is Beam Suntory at 17%, quite incredible. But again, that's because Bamor, Auchentoshan, Ardmore, all these distilleries chasing the high volume, chasing the supermarket sales, chasing the cheap. That's what's happened there. I don't know if it's the right strategy. Please don't do it with. So we're talking about Bamor, we're talking about Lefroy, we're talking about Auchentoshan. Please don't do it with Glengarry. Nika, Ben Nevis. The Ben Nevis 10 was already a £50 bottle in 2020. It's maybe a £60 bottle now. So we've not seen much of a creep there. It's kind of more of the same, but really it's not that big a brand. It's not that well established. They've brought out a non-age statement Coralish since. And we've seen relatively static pricing, but it has bumped up a wee bit too. Position 4, quite amazing. 10% under inflation CVH. Now CVH is what used to be Distell, which used to be Burn Stewart. So that's the guys in charge of Tobermory Electric, Bunnahabhain and Deanston. Right across the board, right up to 18-year-old product. I'm very glad to say, and this is not an invitation to anybody at CVH to bump the prices up, because you've got a strong model based on exactly the perfect position that you are in right now. Bunnahabhain 18 is much more expensive than Deanston 18, of course. Generally speaking, CVH, natural whiskies as well, doing a decent job for us. Good stuff. We'll keep talking about it. We'll keep buying. We hope to keep you healthy. Certainly in our minds. Position 3, Tomatin, owned by Takara Shuzo. So we're talking about the producer here. Tomatin is a brand. Obviously, Kuboken is also a brand. It's a distillery. It's owned by Takara Shuzo. 14%, clearly, easily bucking the trend. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that the next two I'm going to share with you is, we will need to caveat a little bit here, to the point that we could argue that Tomatin is at the top of the tree here, because position 2 is actually Kilchoman. Now, I've got a warning here that back in 2020, Kilchoman didn't have much of a core range. Mahir Bay, that was about it, and we had the annual release of the Loch Gorm. Sanig didn't exist back in 2020, and certainly much more of the recent premium stuff, the single cask stuff, the 16-year-old. None of that is measured here. So despite the fact that Mahir Bay and the standard core range Kilchoman looks like it's not gone up that much over the years, Kilchoman was already quite pricey back in 2020, and they've kept the core range pretty stable. But as a brand, we've seen Kilchoman getting a wee bit pricey. I know it's hard for them. I know they're struggling to make ends meet here and there. They're fighting against a lot of the things going on and stuff, but I think they need to keep their audience on board. They need to keep the people that shout about the product on board. Number 2, though, decent job. And right at the top, like I say, single-digit percentage, 6% is Picard. That's a French company. Tullibardine is the distillery, Scotch malt distillery I'm speaking about. In the last 5 years, they've kept prices 6%. It's not even worth talking about. It's static. They've kept prices pretty static. Now, are all of us shouting about Tullibardine products, the 225s, the 15-year-old, the various, the Murrays, and all of the, are we shouting about it? Not very often. Most of their product goes to France, and I suspect that that's what's keeping things neat. Let's dive into the top 10 sinners. Wait till you see these percentages here. Now, this is based on producers here, and this is very clumsy. I have to caveat it with the fact that I've just taken all the data points that I've been collecting over the last 5 years. Comparing the two gives me a percentage. It's in order for me to give that average percentage over the producer. I take all their brands and use the average percentage increase over all the brands. Quite clumsy. It's just me looking for trends. Position 10, producer. Jura's, 33%. 33% increase, which is a wee bit over, 8% over what we would expect to see. Jura's have Craigellachie. Jura's have Altmore. They have, I'm trying to think of more, Royal Bracla. One or two others. They have Glendeveron, of course, or the Deveron. And there's one that I'm forgetting. You guys can fill in the blanks, knowledgeable whiskey folk. But what we've seen here, despite relative stability from most of the brands, we've seen a bit of a creep. And where we've seen the biggest creep in prices is, of course, the story of tonight. 18-year-old, 17-year-old, the more premium stuff and upwards. That's what's crippling them. Number 9, Gordon MacPhail. We're talking about Benriach here. I'll say the exact same thing again. Copy and paste. The standard stuff, we're able to get really quite decent vintage stuff in the Contrast series. Natural whiskies out of Benriach. It's been fantastic to see. The price of the cask strength has crept up a little bit. Nothing to write home about, nothing too much, but it's the 15-year-old and the 21-year-old that has spiraled. It's that's skewing these percentages here. So despite Benriach being one of the fan favourites out there, if you want to engage with a well-aged, a mature Benriach, you're having to pay through the nose compared to what you paid as recently as 5 years ago. Position 8, Edrington. Glenrothes, Macallan and Highland Park, 35% increase. Probably not as high as you expected, but as already has been pointed out, the Highland Park price increases, the Macallan price increases were already a factor in 2020. What we've seen is about a third of an increase since then, 10% above expected inflation. Position 7, Brown-Forman, Glenglassaugh, Glendronach, and of course Benriach has been mentioned already. So we've seen an attenuation at Benriach, but we've seen Glenglassaugh getting a bit more expensive, and we've certainly seen huge jumps in the prices at Glendronach. That's what's skewing that, giving them a 36% increase. William Grant's doesn't escape. They're up at position 6, 38%. Again, there is a bit of an increase, a creep in the prices of Glenfiddich 12 and things like that. A bit of a creep in price for Balvenie 12 Doublewood. But it's the premium stuff that's dragging the prices up there for William Grant. Copy and paste. Angus Dundee, absolutely copy and paste here. Tom and Tell 21-year-old, doubling in price. The 18-year-old Glencadam disappearing at, I think it was £85 when it disappeared. And it came back to the shelves a couple of years later at £132. And we didn't buy it. Nobody bought it. I'm not even sure that Angus Dundee even care that people are buying it. They just get the product back out there again. But it's far too expensive. Far too expensive. And that contributed to a huge 39% increase for Angus Dundee, despite Glencadam being something that remains very close to our hearts, especially for things like that little 10-year-old, which remains a gorgeous whiskey with barely 10%, 15% increase in price in 5 years. Position 4, Diageo. This is going to be a surprise to a lot of folk. A lot of people would have been expecting much more. But there are certain brands out there at Diageo that's been barely touched, like Glencandu, Glenkinchie, things like that. It's not really been affected much in price at all. They've focused on things like Talisker, they've focused on Lagavulin, they've focused on Oban. Regardless, right across, the biggest producer in Scotch whisky in the last 5 years is 15% above inflation and price increases. Number 3, Lalique. That's the owners of Glenturret. We've already discussed this. That's a huge increase. Lalique, the producer, and Glenturret, the brand, is one and the same. 47%, we've already talked about it. So Lalique, interchangeable with Glenturret. They only own one distillery, 47% up. So we've covered the fact that it's much more premium than it was. It used to be a chill filtered, it used to be 43%, but we've seen a huge increase in price. Buy your Glenturrets with care. Number 2, Glenfarclas. We've already talked about Glenfarclas tonight. This seems to be purely positioning to me. I think that Glenfarclas was genuinely undersold, but I also think that it was also neglected when it came to trying to meet a minimum baseline for quality, where you could have fantastic releases and batches from Glenfarclas. You didn't know that you were going to get the same again. It looks exactly the same as the previous, a different batch, but the quality could be really quite miss against your previous hit. So what beats all of these? What is worse than a 55% across the board from a producer? Number 1, Pernod Ricard. However, a huge klaxon here, a huge caveat. I've taken Aberlour and Glenlivet and, of course, looked at those prices, the core ranges that for the things that we can buy from Aberlour and Glenlivet as an example. And I've taken the percentages and averaged it. But if we take Longmorn out of it, Longmorn is skewing everything because Longmorn is right at the top. Longmorn has more than doubled. It's tripled in price. If we remove that, Chivas Pernod is still in the top 10, but it would go right into position 10 and everything would bump up. That would mean, with that caveat in hand, that the sinner, the biggest sinner in terms of price increases for the last 5 years, is actually arguably Glenfarclas. However, Chivas Brothers Pernod Ricard have released that Longmorn out with double and triple the prices. So it goes in there and you can see that they've been very, very deliberate, very greedy, and they can't hide, and they probably don't care to hide either. So there we have it. There we have it. There's only one more slide to show you, but I'll jump into the chat quickly before I share with you some of the more recent releases that's come out since 2020, i.e. new distilleries, and see how they're doing against those ridiculous increases we've seen from the crowd. I can see the chat again now. I've got a drama from Justin Wan saying Patreon memberships have seen no price hike for Aquaviti, and I argue that we are getting more. Pulling the parachute. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Buddy, it's so nice to have you in. Is it Valentine's Day here yet? No, we've still got a wee while to go. 17 minutes or so till then. Thank you very much for giving me a wee Patreon shout out, and I'm very, very grateful to it, buddy. Yeah, the Patreon money that I was charging back in as far back as 2018 is still the same today. It's down to you. You decide how much you pay me. That's the thing about Patreon. I don't. Justin, thank you very much for your support as a barfly and a long-standing patron and good friend. Cheers, Justin. Jimmy Legs bought me drama as well. How ironic would it be if this praise for owners cause price rises? Absolutely, Jimmy. It was in my mind. If I brag, if I talk about people, oh, look, these guys are bucking the trend, they're not even at inflation or whatever. Not only am I creating a softer, tenderized audience for the prices to go up, but I'm also potentially encouraging producers to consider putting those prices up. And a couple of things I'll say about that. Number one, it's very unlikely that they're watching. The people that are making these policies, these decisions, these business strategic movements are not really watching the vPub. And even if they are, and even if they're getting some feedback through people that do, the message that I want them to take back is that they are absolutely making sure that they're the ones that's best protected for the future. Scotch doesn't seem to learn. As we slide into economic recession like we did in the early 80s, changing fashions, all of that type of thing, what we need to do is give ourselves an environment that encourages new blood, new interest, something that's anti-fashion. But that's not what Scotch whisky has been seeking over the last couple of decades. It's become more and more and more and more and more and more aspirational. It's been run more by people who are into lifestyle business models rather than whisky business models. So of course they're not going to learn from the previous mistakes that Scotch whisky has made. Of course, Scotch whisky will suffer from the same cycles that's been happening for years. I'm going to summarise to that end a wee bit towards the end. Danny Hebbington, my pal Danny up in Speyside, has gifted 10 Aquavitae memberships to 10 of you out there who have automatically become barflies. Thank you for your support. You give access to channel-themed emoji and your wee barfly loyalty thing next to your name and stuff like that. But the biggest thing that you're doing, the biggest thing that Danny's helped you do there is to keep all our content ad-free. I never need to split my ad revenue with Google because there isn't any. Gregor is saying to all the barflies, do me a solid and flood the chat with some Roy emojis ahead of Valentine's. I think it's important to share how much we love the vPub and appreciate him and all he does. You're a big sook, Gregor. We need to. It's nice to have you as a pal. It's nice to have somebody who knows me better than most sharing a lot of really positive things. That means a lot, buddy. Thank you. I don't get to decide what I pay in Patreon Aquavitae. If I did, I'd be living in a much smaller home. All these lovely, lovely words. It's not Valentine's for me, buddy. It's not. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Gregor. Thank you very much for your kind words. Two evangelists from Patreon as well. Two good pals. And all the Roy emojis coming in as well. Gregor's actually sent some other emojis that need to be added. There's even a surprise emoji that I'll share with you when it's ready. But he's updated that Ralphie emoji too to bring it up to date with Ralphie's new colour. So I need to get that uploaded as well. And certainly I have to have it done for the next time that Ralphie appears on the vPub, right? So that his emoji, the Ralphie emoji, is in the right colour uniform. Final slide for tonight, until we get to the quiz at the end. Well, at least I think it is. And I'm going to just talk about some of the new producers that have come on board since I started to do and collect all of this data. So these are new brands that have launched since 2020. Okay, so we didn't talk about these brands, but they have suffered from the same dynamics as everyone else. Inflation, higher material costs, energy costs, and they've walked into the same whiskey market and dynamics as everyone else did from 2020 to 2025. An overheated market and then a really cool market in much more recent times. Let's see how they're doing. I've got 13, I think, of relatively new distilleries with core ranges. I've focused on something that you can at least land on as a core range. So pulling up 13 through 11, we've got Daft Mill, 11% under inflation, Torravik, half, and Knocknean, half. Now, what I'll say, I'll caveat all three of those. Daft Mill has always been an expensive product. So a 90 quid bottle that goes up to 105, that's what we're seeing there. We've seen an increase on Daft Mill. That said, compared to inflation, they're underperforming. We're starting to see Daft Mill sitting on the shelf now. I think it's going to get to the point that we're going to maybe suggest that they've reached their ceiling for the standard 46% core range, of course. Torravik came out at 50 odd pounds. It's still at 50 odd pounds today, whether you're talking about the 2017 Legacy, the Altglean, whatever it is. But we're seeing that it's kind of stabilized and have not gone much more expensive. They've got a very decent value cask strength out there. And I think if you're an enthusiast, that might be the one I would recommend. The Knocknemoina was a nice addition to the range out there, came out at a similar price point. Knocknean, it's gone up. I think it arrived at the high 40s. It's into the 50s now. This is an organic malt whiskey. We need to remember that when we talk about Knocknean as well. Very rare thing out there. Fairly stable on pricing. Then as we go into the 10th place, Ardnamurchan, all the geek, well, it's not everyone's favourite, but let's say the Whiskey Botherers, one of the Whiskey Botherers' favourite. You might remember their inaugural launched at £45. And if you look around today, you can still pick up Ardnamurchan AD in the late 40s. almost static on price, but the RRP for it is about 52, 54, maybe 52, I think now. But generally speaking, across their range, we've seen a very, very minuscule increase. And to talk about Ardnamurchan only going up 9% since it was launched in 2020 is something that they've achieved. Lindor's even less, 8%. Lindor's has got some great value entry-level product out there. The 1494, I know it's written in Roman numerals, but we can see that static, and sometimes you can see that much cheaper than it was originally launched for in 2025. Isle of Rassay, similar story there. Fairly rock solid on prices, not asking too much. Even when they've brought out their much more recent core range, the Dram, they're calling it, I think we're seeing decent pricing. And the cast strength releases and things like that, we're seeing solid pricing from Isle of Rassay. And for a lot of these new producers, it's kind of in line with what they promised. They said, look, we know that our launch prices for these whiskies that are sometimes 3 and 4 and 5 years old, we know that we're asking you for quite a lot. You can buy a 12-year-old malt for a similar price. But we're a small concern, we're building, and we will hold our pricing for as long as we can, and we're seeing that play out here in this list. Then we've got joint third for 5 different producers who have pretty much stuck with their original pricing. There are some caveats here, there really are. Sometimes the range has been switched out and switched up. Sometimes it's a different product. Sometimes it was launched a wee bit more expensive in the first place. All of these types of things. But generally speaking, Clydeside, Dornoch, Lag, Glenwivis, Wolfburn, their launch prices when they launched, it's pretty much still achievable today. Wolfburn is an exception there. They have got a wee bit more expensive, but I'm speaking about from when I started measuring from 2020. So their cheaper products that were available before 2020 are not included in this calculation. Glenwivis, 63 quid, I think, a bottle for their stuff. Not the cheapest. But it stayed stable at least. Lag have managed to do some incredible stuff. Their Kilmorey now, I've seen the Kilmorey for sale for 45-ish pounds. Dornoch, it's an expensive product, so a bit like Daffmill, very expensive to start with, but they've maintained that pricing, and as they scale up, they're looking to address that. Nobody would look at the Thompson Brothers in general and consider them expensive. The reason that Dornoch is expensive is because it is utterly precious. They make drops of it, tiny amount of whiskey. Clydeside, plenty of it around, kept the prices strong. Some of the ex-bourbon stuff from them recently has been amazing. Okay, position 2. Position 1, both producers that have actually reduced their prices in that 5-year period. Kingsbarns, for their Coaltown, their Ducat, core range products is actually about the same or dropped a wee bit in price. In Glasgow, their original has actually dropped from a 50 quid bottle to a 45 quid bottle. Through economies of scale, what they promised they would try to achieve, despite a 25% increase in inflation in that period of time, have managed to bring it 11% less. That's actually, gross terms, 36% cheaper, over a third cheaper. So I wanted to talk about new brands. Throughout all of the new brands that I discovered, that I happened upon, that I bothered to measure, there are some outliers out there that have got crazy pricing, of course, but generally speaking, the new brands that have been coming along have been doing very well to look after us. The presentation for this evening is complete. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. I'm going to summarise it. Sam is saying, is Nicknean living on borrowed time? I really hope not. I really hope not. It's a unique distillery there, and especially when they're making 2 different spirits, one that they can sell as a young spirit, relatively young age, and the other one that they can lay down for longer maturation, all organic, all environmental considerations and things, whether you agree with individual philosophies or not. What they're doing is earnest. I would love to see them survive. I would also love to find a Nicknean that I can rave about. Maybe I need to revisit Nicknean again. Maybe that's on me. Ryan Sutherland is here. 8 doors, 0% increase, nothing to launch yet. Haha, let's see what happens when it comes out, Ryan. Can't wait for it. And I'm sure you'll be here participating with us when we all get our hands on the first whiskey that our Ryan has produced and released. That'll be something. Gene Kelly saying, where does Ardnahoe fit in here? Well, Ardnahoe only came out last year, Gene, right? So there's really nothing to talk about. 0%. You know, their inaugural came out at £55 and it's still, sorry, they're not their inaugural. Their first core range Infinite Lock at £55 is still at that price. Their inaugural is long sold out. And we're hoping that as they build and onto that core range, as they start to expand their range a little bit, we hope they don't get too carried away and they keep it focused, keep the messaging clear, but more than anything, we hope that they keep the pricing solid too. Jimmy Legacy in Glasgow had to reduce prices after you took me there. You know why. David is saying Glasgow also increased bottle size. That's right. I did. David, thank you for being here. I forgot to mention Glasgow used to be 50 cl. They kept the prices the same when they moved to 70 cl. And then they brought the price down on their original, which is their main core product. Peter Ant is saying, how do we work this with indie bottlers, do you think? Indie bottlers are a completely different thing altogether. They've really suffered. The price increases, if I was doing this exercise with indie bottlers, we would have seen a huge spike, anecdotally speaking, in prices in general. And that's because of the raw cost of the casks of whiskey. Cask investment interest, overheated whiskey market in general, everybody jumping in to invest in whiskey, whether it was a bottled whiskey or a cast whiskey or whatever, or bulk whiskey, just crazy times. That's cooling off fast right now. It will change. Maybe it'll come back to us. It's going to be interesting times ahead. I'm optimistic, but I think it would be unfair to try and do what I've just done with, and I don't have the data as the truth. I didn't do this back in 2020 for indies. When it's small batch and single cask and that type of thing, it's much harder to do. But generally speaking, we would have seen a huge jump in price. Rick Johnson saying, I have a fear this week's quiz will make up for the ease of last week's. Difficult for me to judge. I thought last week's was going to be difficult. I feel like that this week's is a wee bit easy, so probably it's hard. I'm not sure. Not far away from it. Falsgraph is saying that seems to speak to the idea that indies are going to be significantly lower in price. It would be great. I would love to see that too, but I don't know what's going to happen there, because remember, the price that we're going to be asked to pay is not based on the value of the market at that point in time. It's going to be based on what was invested in that cask when it was purchased at any point along the amount of times it changed hands. Don't know what's going to happen. Indies are still bringing it. Indies are bringing us some of the most compelling moments in whiskey right now. Really, really delicious stuff. Fully on board with all the natural everything. They don't add things. They don't take things away. Indies are where it's at, which reminds me, I hope that I'm going to see you all at the Independent Festival in Leith a month from now. It'll be a month on Saturday, right? And like I say, if you're a patron, you're going to get a notification from me soon about how you can get involved in an event that we're all going to gather together in a nice spot, a nice whiskey pub in Edinburgh on the Sunday. More details for that to follow through Patreon first. It's going to be a very small thing. 30 people, that's it. Just how many drams you can get out of a bottle, right? Very specific curated bottles as well, very on theme for my environment, my community. And then if it's not sold out, because it's only for the people who can get to Edinburgh and stay there for the Sunday. So if it doesn't sell out, it'll make it into a public Aquaviti Barflies on Facebook, that kind of thing. Stay tuned. To summarise tonight, I'm worried. Overall, I'm worried. Why? We've seen the prices maintained at the cheap end of the spectrum. Supermarket stuff, high volume stuff, things that are maybe considered, if we were going to be rude about it, bottom shelf. We've seen those prices maintained. Then at the other end of the spectrum, for the premium stuff, 15 years and older, anything that they can add a bit of kudos, a bit of aspirational, a bit of lifestyle, a bit of luxury, a bit of premium, a bit of ultra premium, anything like that, we've seen the prices rocket. All the while, we hear people from companies telling us that the high volume stuff is the things that facilitate these really special premium things. That's not true. These really premium things with the higher margins help keep those cheaper products aggressive, I would argue. They are not loss leading anywhere here. They're making sure that they make money on the premium stuff. Macallan have put this 18-year-old up there at a ridiculous halo price point, so the Dalmores and the Taliskers and everybody else can jump in and try and chase that and say, well, if they can charge that for an 18-year-old, we need to be charging something similar, because else otherwise we just look like cheap. Also runs terrible position to be in, right up to the point that people are sipping things backwards and forwards and they realise that Macallan isn't that great. Nothing, no comment on the quality of the whiskey. It's the experience that you have to pay for, the experience that you get from the glass. My worry is more than that, because it doesn't really matter if they're making money on the cheap end of things. It doesn't matter if they're making money on the premium end of things. What I care about is, how does this new blood that I talk about get into whiskey? How do we stop this decay? How do we stop it being a stuffy environment? How do we stop it being the preserve of the rich or the wealthy? How do we help whiskey get under the skin of people who don't understand how great whiskey is yet? Because that's on our shoulders to do that. And when I say us, I mean anybody that loves whiskey or is into whiskey. I think we should take a responsibility to try and make whiskey a better place than it was when we stepped into it. We should try and have our net contribution to this amazing thing be positive. It's really hard right now because the cheaper whiskey is getting cheaper by using less quality. That has to be the case. If you know you can keep your 12 years old for 6 years old more and charge 3, 4, 5 times as much, well, you're not going to use it. And the 12-year-old, right? You're going to keep as much as you possibly can. You're not going to use your best stuff. You're not going to add about a 14-year-old, about a 15-year-old into your 12-year-old to lift it and make it as good quality as possible. We know anecdotally, albeit, that this is the case, not just with single malts, with blends. We've seen blends drop in quality. Why would you overage? Why would you try to maintain that minimum baseline of quality when all you have to do is maintain that minimum baseline of age statement or profile or whatever it is? It's not about quality now, because you know that the more mature you can bring your malt onto, the more money you're going to get for it. And the prices just keep getting pushed up and up and up. Forget about the fact that 15-year-old, 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 25-year-old, there's more of it around than there has ever been, because the expansion has been happening for 2 decades. How are we helping new people come into whiskey? How are we fighting the effects of fashion and fad? I think we're failing right now. I think the accessibility is not there. You look back, it's nice to have Arnie Doodle the Dram in here, who's incidentally bought me a dram and saying, I'll send you a Valentine's flower as a symbol of my newfound whiskey love. But to avoid awkwardness, this will do. Thank you, Roy, and all the bar flags. Yes, I appreciate this a wee bit more than I do, as much as flowers would be, and as nice, Arnie, as flowers would be. Thank you for the dram, buddy. Thank you. And thank you for being here. But as a younger person who's come into whiskey quite recently, Arnie, you're quite rare. I feel like it's rarer. It's harder to get younger people into whiskey because the price point of getting people in is too high. And the quality of the cheaper stuff is not good enough, anecdotally speaking. But all of the figures that I've gathered over the last 5 years back up that. Maybe let's not call it an assessment, but call it a risk. Inverurie Whiskey Shop, good to see you. And he's saying economy of scale suggests that smaller producers will be more expensive. Also, they have been unprecedented economic factors since 2020. Sorry if you covered that in the first hour. I did talk about it generally. But if we're talking about prices increasing, especially against the rate of inflation as I have throughout tonight, buddy, whiskey's no different from anything else. There have been other factors influencing whiskey. There is no doubt in my mind that greed is part of it. Dorpass Whiskey is saying, yes, in today's economy, buying into good quality whiskey is a stretch for many people, especially younger folks trying to get a home and start a family. Sam is saying it's going to remain a cyclical thing. and the greedy whisky industry will be hit by a slump after pricing out younger drinkers. I think that's unfortunately true. But most of the people in charge today are not in charge for the long haul. Very transient roles. Peter Hunt is saying, I think the struggle, we are always the 1% of the 99% of sales, and the industry is happy with that because the cycle has been the same for the last probably century at least. Well, the cycle's hurt the industry significantly. You know, we could go back to 1983 when we lost 23 distilleries, right? Okay, sorry, I think it was 16 in 1983, but we lost in excess of 20 distilleries in a very short space of time, and a lot of those never came back. David is saying, I would say that the first thing we can do to help the young blood is share until it hurts, and then share some more. Price increases divided as prices conquered. I love the sentiment, David. I know that there are people out there like you getting together in Portugal in little smaller groups and bringing people in and inviting people along and sharing. And the overaccumulation of whiskey that we talked about in recent vPubs, especially last week, we have the ability to reach out to these people and teach them about slowing down and about sipping and tasting for enjoyment rather than drinking for effect, and all of the great things that whiskey can bring to us and remind us of what it is to be mortal and be alive. This is the problem that we have today, is that if people touch whiskey today, we only hear about the people that have been switched on by this experience with this whiskey. We don't get to hear from the people that tried it and thought, It's immeasurable, I think. Okay, let's get on to the quiz at the end. Enough of me banging on. It is Valentine's Day now. It's fully Valentine's Day, 2 hours 21 in typical vPub time. I do have a quiz at the end. Of course, I do, like we always do, and I'm glad to see so many of you in. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Leave your comments under, as you always hopefully do. Sorry for the weeks that I don't get back to the comments like last week. Very mindful of it. I got the chapters in. I was super busy and I meant to go back in and do the comments. Maybe I'll try and catch up on that over the weekend. Certainly, I'll try and do that under this vPub. But leave the comments underneath. Why is that valuable? Because the people that come in like you that read it and want to take in opinions and things from you as well. So it's not just me and from my perspective. Okay, yes, we do have a quiz at the end. Where are we? And I know you're maybe expecting something as easy as last week. I thought it was quite tough last week, but so many of you 10 out of 10 aced it. But I did give away a few, didn't I? Because I left the green ticks in. Hopefully I haven't done that this week. Fingers crossed. But it's always multiple choice. Please stay comfortable, relax a wee bit, see how you got on. Do what Michael Wood does. Just before you start the quiz, write down A, B, or C 10 times. Pick out like an A, a C, a B, an A, and things. That's your inner chimpanzee, right? It's a 33% chance, so the pass mark for the chimpanzee would be third, 33%, and then see how you get on. Pass mark for you playing the game fully is usually 5 out of 10. I suspect most of you, majority, all of you will get 5 out of 10 tonight, but I also think, I feel like the majority, a good chunk of you will manage a 10 out of 10 as well. Anyway, you're only playing against yourself. Share the score if you want to. Lean on the crowd if you want to. That's absolutely fine too. Good luck, everyone. I missed last week, says Seb. Okay, good to have you in, buddy. Talking about you in Portugal and your wee crowd. David is in. Usually there's a few others of you in as well. So keep it simple, says Seb. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Oh, okay. He said, Aquavita, I disagree. Says Inverary Whisky Shop, the drinker is so much more open to style and mixability and less influenced by the archaic water-only brigade. It's the collectors pushing the price up, not the drinkers. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. And I think that, okay, the water-only brigade is not what I'm trying to do. If you're mixing and if you're into flavor and style and all that kind of thing, you're broad brush, we're speaking about drinking. We're speaking about making whiskey palatable, making whiskey easy to drink. I think when you keep whiskey neat and natural and as good as it can be, and you can switch people on that way, you get people in and you get people from a drink. And I think we're conflating quite a lot of arguments there. Collectors pushing up the price and not the drinkers. I think it's the price is getting pushed up because of the The kudos because of everything. I could get, that's just too deep. I just feel like there's so many things to talk about in that statement. My point is, regardless, you can either participate in being part of the who puts the prices up or how the prices go up, or you can choose not to, as I've showed tonight. Saints and sinners are there for a reason. There are producers out there that are actively, deliberately, greedily putting the prices up way beyond any reasonable metric or measure. And it's nothing to do with the fact that their whiskey's becoming more valuable or more scarce. It's just product positioning, and that's the truth of it. There's more whiskey out there in barrels and casks and warehouses right across Scotland than there's ever been in our history, and yet less people coming on board to drink it. That's the problem we have. And I don't care how you get people into whiskey, whether it's through a mixed drink, whether it's through a blend, whether it's through a malt, whether it's through a coach, somebody gently holding a hand and guiding people in, or whether it's through someone's own personal discovery that they're actually able to just happen upon it. There needs to be things in place to help all of that happen, and prices that are out of reach for the, especially out of reach for the best stuff, I think is a huge barrier. Tom Freeney saying, I've got ahead. It's early start tomorrow. I'll catch you and my fellow barflies on the replay tomorrow. Welcome back, Tom Freeney, now that you're picking it up on the replay, buddy. Thanks for hanging out with us live as well. Danny is saying, I can't imagine how much whiskey I'll be able to afford when my kids move out. Never mind the market. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Maybe your kids will end up helping you too. Graham Fraser saying, I think more folk are experiencing older quality whiskies at tastings rather than forking out a fortune for a bottle. Well, we have to, for the people who are lucky enough to get along to a tasting like us, Graham, right? Nice to see you this week, buddy. Daisy is saying, I tried to make a whiskey sample basket to entice new and younger enthusiasts. Daisy, that's you doing your mixtape, isn't it? Love it. And Rick Johnson is saying, go to a whiskey tasting. What do you see? Mostly older white men. The community needs to open up some new seats. We'll do our very, very best, but I'm speaking to you as an older white man, right? Whiskey with Molly Bennett saying, is anyone actually buying this massively inflated whiskey? Well, somebody must be, but I know it's no us, Ben, and it's nice to have you in, buddy. All right, let's get this quiz underway. Good luck, everyone. 10 questions. Question 1. Nice and easy to start with. Which of these ex-Diageo distilleries also had a flora and fauna release in the 1990s? I'm going to give you 3 distilleries. I need you to tell me the ex-Diageo distillery that once had a flora and fauna release. A. Aberfeldy, B. Royal Bracla, or C. Colilla? Here we go. Mike is saying, broad brush strokes, yes, but distilleries are businesses and they see people in the secondary market paying 3 times the amount that they charge, and they're going to notice that. That's absolutely right. Listen, Springbank's prices have gone up the same as everyone else. But you measure Springbank's prices that have gone up and it's like 20 to 30%. Glengyle, the same. It's within the measures of inflation. This is a choice. And it's lazy. If you see somebody overpaying on the secondary market through an overheated phase and decide to compete as a part of the primary market with that secondary market, then you're putting the control of your business into someone else's hands. It's really ugly what we're seeing right now, where the secondary market is undercutting the primary. I hope auctions are doing quite well, but I suspect the auctions that made good money on the premium stuff maybe not so well. But the auctions are coming back to the enthusiasts a little bit, which probably scales things down considerably. But it's nice to see that some of the whiskey is coming back to us. Okay, let's see how you're doing with this one. Ian Bruce is saying B. Majority of saying suggesting that Royal Bracla is an ex-Diageo distillery that once had a flora and fauna. Most of you are agreeing with that. Everyone's going with B. Nicholas is saying C. And Daniel Key is saying D. All righty, let's go. I can tell you Aberfeldy is an ex-Diageo distillery that did have a flora and fauna. Royal Bracla, the same. Ex-Diageo did have a flora and fauna. Colilla did have a flora and fauna, but it's not an ex-Diageo distillery. It's still very much a Diageo distillery. So if you answered A or B, give yourself a point. The banana skin was there because it's not a usual freebie for everyone. It's not any one of these is right. You had to be careful and avoid that C there tonight. Question 2. What is the best-selling single malt in Scotland's largest export market? So we're looking for a single malt and a market, and we're talking about by volume. That's really important. Largest export market by volume. A, we're talking about Glenlivet in China. B, we're talking about Aberlour in France. Or C, we're talking about Glengrant in Italy. Scotland's largest export market. What is the best-selling single malt in Scotland's largest export market by volume? So we're talking about the amount of Glenlivet that's sold in China, of course, the amount of Aberlour that's sold in France, or the amount of Glengrant that's sold in Italy. So we're looking for the largest market and the largest malt sold in that market. Maybe that's tricky. Maybe that's tricky. I thought maybe this was quite obvious. It was quite well known. The largest Scotch market by volume. It may have been overtaken by India in the last year or so. Waiting for figures to come out to confirm that. I'm going by the Malt Whisky Yearbook. If you're looking to get a wee bit better at the quiz at the end, you could do worse than picking up a copy of Ingvar's annual Super Guide to Malt Whisky. Focuses heavily on Scotch, of course, but it focuses exclusively on malt. Billy Abbott's saying Aquavita India was marked as the biggest earlier today in an SWA press release. There you go. So now the figures are coming out, and that's going to be reflected in, I guess, this year's release of the Malt Whisky Yearbook for 2026. So that's good that there's actually figures coming out, but it's talking about a biggest in terms of volume. So that's going to include bulk export as well. Seb K is saying following Graham Fraser is usually better than the Malt Whisky Yearbook. Fair enough, Seb. When Graham is in and playing along, it's not a bad way to go. And Billy Abbott is saying Ingvar for the win. I agree with you, Billy. He's a superstar. He's just a bloody nice guy too. All right, absolutely most of you getting this right. According to Malt Whisky Yearbook, Peterhead Frank is saying it's B. Absolutely. Biggest export market by volume is France, and therefore the biggest selling malt is Aberlour. No coincidence that it's owned by a French company, right? Question 3. Ardmore in the Highlands has, throughout its history, been associated with which famous blend? I'm going to give you 3 blended Scotch whiskies, and I want to know which one we can associate with Ardmore. A, J&B Rare, B, Jura's White Label, or C, Teacher's Highland Cream. Graham is saying, okay, I'll help. And he's chiming in. Graham's going along with C. G&B Rare, G&B Justerini and Brooks, Diageo brand, Jura's White Label, of course, Jura's one of the biggest selling blends in America, North America, I believe. But Teacher's Highland Cream, lesser seen here in the UK, but it's traditionally for 100 years at least been associated with Ardmore. So if you answered C, you're spot on. So we go on to question 4. According to its official website, how many core range expressions do Ardbeg release today? How many core range releases on their official website, according to the owners? A, they have 3 core range from Ardbeg. B, there are 6 core range from Ardbeg. Or C, 9 core range from Ardbeg. I think that's another thing that's happened in Scotch whisky recently, Scotch malt whisky, is that the core ranges used to be fairly easy to keep a handle on. But now the plethora of releases, the myriad releases, the confusing amount of releases can make it a wee bit difficult. Does this include handbags, says Peter Hunt, tongue-in-cheek? We're talking about 70 cl bottles of core range whiskey. Lots of you suggesting B, 6. And you're absolutely spot on. We've obviously got the 10-year-old, and then the Corryvreckan Ugadal. We've got Wee Beastie 5-year-old. We've got the Anno, and we've also got, bizarrely, the 25-year-old down under their core range listings. So if you go on Ardbeg's website, it's 6 core range releases today. Question 5 is always the picture question. Bit of a strange one. We're looking at a very, very, a really clean pyramid of a mountain in Scotland. I can tell you this is Schiehallion. this particular mountain is Schiehallion, and interestingly, the only Munro I've actually climbed to the summit of. I've been up the very, very top of that. It was a nice day out. But I'm going to ask you which distillery Schiehallion is closest to. A. Aberfeldy, C. Isle of Raasay, or C. Ardnamurchan. Schiehallion is a Munro. An official Munro. Decent beer, says Billy Abbott. I would agree. It's been a wee while since I've had a Schiehallion. I'm trying to think of the company. It's got, is that a mouse or something? It's the logo. I'm trying to think what the name of the producer of Schiehallion is. Remind me. Jason Whiskey Wise is saying A, along with Michael. C 2019. Good to have you in, Michael. Daniel Key is saying A. And Very Whiskey Shop is saying we used to weigh the weight of the world. It was used to weigh the weight of the world. That's right. Very interesting wee thing. Wee anecdote to go along with that. So Falsgraf is playing against the chimpanzee, and the chimpanzee is on 2 out of 4, which is a pass mark, but fortunately he's on full 4 out of 4. Okay, absolutely, all of you've got this right. Bob Wenting is saying A for Aberfeldy. Absolutely, Bob, nice to have you in. You're absolutely spot on, as well as most of everyone else. David is going with the flow and also saying A. Aberfeldy, not far from Pitlochry, not far from Aberfeldy. Going to question 6. The questions are going to get much harder, as they always do in the second half, as we bring it home. Question 6. Batch 2 of which special edition has just been released in the past few days? Anticipated. I've not bought this yet, but I'm keen to. Don't know if that helps you. Ben Nevis Cast Strength. Bunnahabhain's 21-year-old Cast Strength. Ardnamurchan's Madeira Cask. A. Ben Nevis. B. Bunnahabhain. C. Ardnamurchan. Batch 2. If it helps you, I can tell you that the first batch was 2023. Oh no, was it 2022 actually? It might be 2022. I don't have any left of the original batch, else I would go and check. Seb K saying the first one was epic. Inverurie Whiskey Shop is saying drinking right now. Do you have any stock there, Mike? Can I pick some up? Can't wait to put my hands on this one, says Pedro. Batch 1 was fantastic. I loved it. If there's a batch 2, doesn't sound way special anymore, says Pete Head. So it should be one of these one hit and gone. Had a wee taste of a sample last year, says Bob. My God, it was so good. Batch 2 is a good one too. Okay, I love whiskey from Madeira. It's one of my favourite wood types. It seems to work really, really well. Absolutely spot on. Everybody's talking about Ardnamurchan's Madeira cask. I think this is a slightly higher outturn. I hope there's enough for it to get out there and for a lot of people to get hold of it. Joe Smith enjoying 6 out of 6 along with Ben Whiskey with Molly. Good to see you in, guys. Graham Fraser, Desi Leland. Oh my goodness, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. So many all the way down. Question 7. These do get trickier. Which of these 21st century Highland distilleries is the oldest? I'm going to give you 3 new distilleries, just much like the question from last week. Tell me which one is the oldest. Which of these 21st century Highland malt distilleries is the oldest? A. Burnabenny, B. Ballindalach, or C. Ardross? Tricky now, isn't it? Burnabenny, Ballindalach, Ardross. Peathead. Madeira, happy to leave it for others. It's quite funny how whiskey is like that. The amount of people that love port cask and it's not mine. Wine cask even less so for me. But Madeira seems to just, I think it's that lovely cedarwood, wood spice. I don't know what it is specifically, that kind of nutty cooked fruit spice. Love it. Falsgraf is worried by the banana skin, saying B or not B. That's the question. Absolutely, Falsgraf. Which of these 21st century Highland malt distilleries is the oldest? Burnabenny, Ballindalach, Ardross. Remember, I do tend to ask these questions, and I always have asked these questions based on Scotch malt whiskey regions. So Ballinadalach is absolutely the oldest. B is the oldest, but B is a Speyside distillery. It's not a Highland. That's the reason for the banana skin. Well spotted, Klaus. So between Burnelbenny and Ardross, I can tell you Burnelbenny is 2019, Ardross is 2017. Huge scale, Ardross, flying right under the radar. Capacity to make 1 million litres. Really putting them up there with some of the bigger distilleries. Be interesting. I don't know how long it's going to be. They talk about 8, 9, 10 years before we'll see anything from there. It's been going already for about half that. But there you go. It's been going since 2017. If you answered C, give yourself a point. 7 was an asshat, says Sid Martin. Banana skin. The asshat's still to come, buddy. Question 8. Which was the first singleton to be released back in the late 80s and early 90s? What was the first singleton? This is from DCL, the predecessor to Diageo, of course. A, Singleton of Glenord. B, Singleton of Athrusk. Or C, Singleton of Dufton? Which of those three was the first singleton to be released back in the late 80s and early 90s? I know, Sam, you're absolutely right. Technically speaking, is in the Highland region, but in Scotch whisky, in the context of the vPub and the quiz at the end, we do tend to differentiate it. That said, if you are a Speyside distillery, it's fine for you to put Highland on the label. And if you answered B, Ballinadalach, and you want to take that point, because of the way the vPub at the end works, if you feel like that is the right the right answer, you're welcome to take it. I celebrate it, keep it, justify it. It's your point. If you answered B and you feel strongly that that was the right answer, absolutely take the point, Sam. That's the rules of the vPub quiz at the end. Graham Fraser is saying, ooh, it's B, is he? Lots of other people are saying B as well. I wonder how many people said B before Graham Fraser said that. Quite a lot of you too, absolutely. Absolutely. Jason Whiskey Wise is saying they have some 1970s vintages of these bottlings, which are nice drams. I don't know if I can afford them, though. I think the first one was a 1975, Jason, right? And it was the first singleton. Doesn't exist today. We've got Glendullan, Dufton, and Glenord, which means the first one was actually a Thrusk. And the reason that the singleton brand, anecdotally, I don't know if this is absolutely true, but it makes sense to me. The reason that the singleton brand came around is because they felt nobody was going to be able to pronounce a Thrusk. But there's lots of other things they could have done. But they got the name Singleton. Now they've got 3 distilleries, Diageo today, Glenord, Glendullan, and Dufton, making up their best-selling malt, which is actually 3 of their best-selling malts. I say it's a wee bit of cheatery, but it is what it is. Well done, everyone. Didn't they change it to Ord because nobody could pronounce it? I don't know if that's what made them change the actual distillate. But they had the singleton, and they eventually Glenord came along, and Glendullan and Dufton, but they all became the singleton, going into different markets often at times. Question 9 in Scots Gaelic: the name of which whisky distillery means corner of the field in English? A, Auchentoshan, B, Altmore, or C, Altavania? So the way that you could have potentially answered a few of the questions tonight, certainly that question 8 there, is if you'd worked out tonight's theme. Every single question tonight has been distilleries beginning with the letter A. That doesn't help you for question 9 though, because all 3, Auchentoshan, Altmore, and Altavania, but I want to know which one is Scots Gaelic for corner of the field. A, Auchentoshan, B, Altmore, or C, Altavania. Sorry for the spelling mistake there on C. Olivania, it's Altavania. Gosh, geez. You're making this look like such an easy quiz. So Kyle Taylor has actually written the Gaelic. Fantastic, Kyle. Corner of the field is indeed Auchentoshan. Auchentoshan. All right, the asshat is still to come. Question 10 is still to come before we finish up the vPub for tonight. Let's see how you're all doing on your points. Rick Johnson on an 8, Whiskey with Molly Ben on 7, Hell's Wid. Desi Vleeland on 8, Peter Box on 8, Chris Pollock on 8. My goodness. Graham Fraser, Jerry Miller have both got a 9. 2 people hanging on. Wow, there's been some attrition towards the end. So it fell down. Ian Bruce on a 9. Fantastic, Ian. Well done. I hope I've not missed anybody as the chat jumped there. Jerry Miller got you, Jerry, didn't I? Chuck is on an 8. Malt Minion, good to see you. Billy Abbott saying braced. How you getting on with the score, Billy? How you doing? You holding it together for a 9 out of 9? Potential 10 out of 10. Jason Whiskey Wise on a 6 out of 7. Obviously missed a couple of questions. Jason, good to see you hanging in to the end, buddy. Sid Martin on an 8. 7s for George McLeod. Good to see you, George. Inverary Whiskey Shop on 7. Gino on an 8. Falsgraph is on 9 out of 9. So we've got at least 4 people with a 9 out of 9. And Dave the Brave in with an 8 out of 9. Good to see you, Dave. Okay, the asset at the end is, you'll probably predict this one. How many Scotch malt distilleries begin with the letter A? Okay, it's one thing for you to answer that, but you need to match it. It's the asshat, so you need to know the answer to 2 things. Is it about the same number as A, the number of Scotch malt distilleries owned by Pernod Ricard, Chivas Brothers? Is it about the same number as B, the age statement on Jura's Perpective number 1 release of 2024? I might have helped you out with that tonight, actually. Is it this about the same number as C, the number of new distilleries listed in the 2025 Malt Whisky Yearbook? How many Scotch malt distilleries, active Scotch malt distilleries, I should clarify, begin with the letter A? The same as the number of distilleries owned by Pernod Ricard, same as the age statement on Jura's Perspective 01, or the same as the number of new distilleries listed in the 2025 Malt Whisky Yearbook. Let's go back to this wee Jura that we're sipping tonight. Yeah, it's sweet. There's a kind of weird kind of Jura element to it. There's a dryness on the finish tonight now as well after sipping that. What was the last one I sipped there? It was the Glen Scotia 18. Kyle Taylor is saying Roy's Tell. Okay. So many of you are doing really, really well tonight. Billy Abbott is shouting Pernod Rock. Billy Abbott is saying B. Dave, sorry, I just missed. Dave the Brave is saying B. Kierbin is saying B. Graham Fraser is saying B. Falsgraph, wow, Roy, you are fantastic. Hey, what have I done Falsgraph to be so fantastic? Okay. I can tell you that Scotch Malt Distilleries owned by Pernod Ricard number 12. Age statement on Jura's Perspective is 16. New distilleries listed in the Malt Whisky Yearbook is 44. Which one of these? How many A distilleries are there? Well, I can tell you that there are 16. So if you answered B, give yourself a point. Now I'm looking for the 10 out of 10. If you're a barfly, grab the 10 emoji. I see that immediately. Use the 10 emoji to convey to me that you've managed to snag that tonight. Peter Box managed a 9. Joe Smith on a 9. Did the asshat catch you, Joe? Nice to see you in, buddy. Kyle Taylor on a 9 as well. 8 out of 10 for Ben. Totally read the Singleton question wrong. Hellswood is saying 9 out of 10. More than happy with that. Gino on a 9. Gino Camo on a 9. Chris Pollock on a 9. Ben Demon Hunter on a 9. Malt Minion Chuck on a 9. Falsgraph managed 10 out of 10 in the Chimp. 3. You could argue that that's a pass mark for the Chimp, but that's amazing for you, Falsgraph. Well done, buddy. Graham Fraser celebrating a 10 out of 10. So that's 2 of you in with a 10. Fantastic. Congrats to the 10 out of 10, says Daisy. I'm trying to find any other 10 out of 10s tonight. Seb is saying 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 if you count Speyside as a Highland. Take it, Seb. Take it. Take your 10 out of 10. Take it to the bank. That's the rules for it. Try to see if there's any more. Jerry Miller, Ian Bruce, Graham Fraser. So I missed Jerry and I missed Ian Bruce as well, who also managed to snag a 10 out of 10. There they are. They are 10 out of 10 for Jerry and Ian. Fantastic. So a few of you, but a wee bit less than last week. Obviously, I gave away a couple less this week as well. I made a wee mistake last week. So there we go. Thank you for hanging out with me for another almost 3 hours of a vPub that wasn't even supposed to be this week. I had to work on the numbers and crunch the numbers because all of this, I wasn't in a hurry to prepare it. So it was going to be going out next week, but we brought it forward and we managed to put it together for tonight. And I hope it was interesting to you. It was interesting for me to go through the numbers and kind of try and see where things are. A lot of it backs up things that we instinctively know are happening, but a lot of it betrays other things that are not happening, or certainly happening in a much more positive way. And I think tonight it's encouraged me to pick up one or two bottles that otherwise wouldn't have, to have a Glen Scotia 18 back on the shelf, to understand how that's going to change and open up to me going forward, but also to have that wee nice find of a port cask whiskey that's actually really quite juicy and tasty. And in fact, that might be it. No, in fact, I finished it. There's none left in the glass. That's what betrays the fact I was actually enjoying it tonight. So it's nice to have them. It's nice to have them be here back on the shelf. And I think at that price point, that's a reasonably priced little whiskey from Glenmorangie. Still remains one of my wee favourite Highland distilleries. Gary Heavington is saying, cheers for the surprise vPub mate, Slancha. Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you right back at you. My pal Graham Brown is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 30 months. Thank you so much, Graham. It's nice to see you and probably hanging out in the background. I hope you've got something nice in the glass. Jean Kelly is saying good night. All nothing better than a vPub with everyone. Nice to have you in, Gina. Always. Sherry Canary saying good night. Thank you, Michael C29. Thank you for another great evening, Aquavite. Nice to have you in, Michael, as always. Graham Fraser is saying cheers, Roy. Good to catch up Tuesday. I feel like I've welcomed Michael C2019 in before. I feel like I have. I feel like it's familiar. I hope this isn't the first time I feel like I've welcomed you before, right? Jason Whiskey Wise, my pal. For years, Jason, right? Good to see you, buddy. Thank you very much, Roy Aquaviti, for the vPub, and good night, all Barflies. Slancha Daisy is saying thank you for a fab and interesting vPub, Roy. I love me a spreadsheet. I don't like spreadsheets as much. But when they're about whiskey, I'm into. Rick Johnson is saying, always a fun evening when you bring out the spreadsheets, Roy. Thank you very much, Rick. What have we got left in the glass? I think I'm going right back to the Benriach 16, the first dram that I poured tonight. There's a wee bit left, and that's what I'll raise to finish the vPub out tonight. Pedro is celebrating being a member for 22 months. And saying, great theme, we'll catch up on replay. Thank you, Pedro. And Peter Lay said, also like what Graham said, good to see you on Tuesday. Good to see you, Graham, and good to see you, Peter, Denise. Good to see Sid Martin on Tuesday as well, and good to see Blair Stevenson. It was a nice wee impromptu gathering, and I was very grateful for the night out. Nice to see you all. Michael saying, many moons ago, but now that I retired, fantastic. So that we have crossed paths before. Kerben saying, thank you very much for tonight. And Mike Molasses saying, great vPub. This kind of analysis is the reason 174 of 200 why I keep coming here. And Billy saying, Aquaviti, if you ever need a spreadsheet fan to do a show, top work, sir. Gino Kimo is saying, good night and thanks. Okay. Let's raise a wee glass to you all. This is a privilege. I absolutely love it. And I look forward to hanging out with you again for another Thursday night next week. Until then, I'll raise this wee glass of this 16-year-old Benriach. And thank you all very much for joining me again tonight. Remind you all that you're very dearly loved. Until then, Slancha. Cheers, everyone.